This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Shake Me to My Core by R33sesPieces, composed by Burning Aurora, Kaliana, and Flowerhawk. Chapter 1. Sirius had just settled in with a cup of coffee and the Saturday crossword when the flat's door opened with a bang.
I don't want to talk about it, James.
The high, nearly hysterical pitch of Remus's voice almost drowned out the sound of the doorknob slamming into the wall. Almost. Mooney was going to be so annoyed if they didn't get their security deposit back. James was still slipping off his shoes as he practically chased Remus through the living room and into the kitchen.
It's perfectly natural, Mooney. It happens all the time.
Well, that didn't sound good. Sirius pulled himself off the couch and leant against the door jamb to watch them argue. Curiosity piqued. Remus pulled his sweaty curls with clenched fists.
I've never been so mortified in all my life. I can never show my face at the gym again.
He turned his big, pleading eyes on Prongs, who immediately caved, and who could blame him? It was impossible to say no to Mooney's sad eyes. He always looked like someone drop-kicked his puppy, then ate the last biscuit. It felt cruel.
That's fine.
James soothed.
We can change memberships if you'd like, but it really isn't that bad.
It is that bad, Prongs. I'm never going to any gym again. Thank you for the help, but no, thank you. It's not for me. I'm done.
Finally, Sirius couldn't stand the suspense any longer.
It can't possibly be that bad, Moons. What happened?
James snickered as Remus covered his face and let out an anguished groan. James took over in Remus's embarrassed silence.
You know how I've been training Moons in gentle strengthening and functional movement to help his Ehlers-Danlos?
Yeah, obviously.
Of course, Sirius knew. He was the one who sent Remus the links with the data to support the recommendations after James's source of,
Trust me, bro,
was unsurprisingly ineffective. They'd been friends for a decade and still. Prongs somehow didn't know that the best way to bend Remus to his will was to give him peer-reviewed evidence.
Well, I advanced him from hanging flutter kicks to knee raises, and suddenly,
James twitched and gasped in an imitation of something. If Sirius didn't know better, he'd think it was supposed to look like he came.
What does that mean? What are you doing?
James burst into giggles.
he had a coregasm on the captain's chair.
Remus whined, and Sirius's brain rebooted itself.
He had a what?
A coregasm.
James said, as though that was a normal word Sirius was supposed to know. Remus's hands had fallen limply to his sides, but he still looked like he might actually combust at any moment.
You know, when you're working your lower core and it stimulates your pelvic floor and your body misreads some signals and you come.
Sirius did not know that, actually.
That's the thing that happens.
James nodded.
Has it happened to you?
No, it's more common in people with vaginas. Maybe because of the way the organs are connected. I don't know.
James shrugged.
But it's not uncommon. I bet at least one person comes on that machine every day.
Sirius blinked a few times as his brain absorbed this fascinating physiological factoid.
And today, that person was Mooney.
Yep.
James said cheerily. Remus whimpered, an utterly pitiful sound that didn't deter Sirius's curiosity in the slightest. He had questions, and they required answers.
Were you hard?
No,
Were you turned on?
it just kind of happened all at once.
So all physical, no psychological.
Yeah.
Sirius nodded, considering, then continued his interrogation.
Did you cream your pants in public?
Remus buried his face in his hands again, which Sirius took as a yes. Interesting. What was it like to jizz whilst flaccid?
He rinsed out his shorts in the gym showers and stole a plastic bin liner to put them in, so they wouldn't get his whole bag wet.
James cackled.
Smart.
Sirius nodded his approval.
What did it feel like?
Remus let out a long, beleaguered sigh.
Like a prostate orgasm, kind of.
How did you do it? Could you teach me?
Sirius desperately wanted to know what it felt like, and Remus did it. Their Mooney. The bloke who read on the sidelines of every Phi-Ed class they ever had in secondary. If he could do it, surely Sirius could.
I don't know. And even if I did, I wouldn't teach you because it's weird to spunk yourself in public. And also, I never want to think about it again.
Did anybody else notice, or?
Please stop.
Remus begged, peeking one reproachful eye out from between his fingers.
I just want to forget it ever happened.
Oh, right, sorry.
Sirius agreed. That was fair. He'd gotten carried away with his curiosity, but Remus had always been more private about things like that. Sirius didn't think he'd ever heard a cheeky wank behind their dorm curtains, and it took him 6 months after things ended to admit he'd been shagging Caradoc Dearborn in uni. Sirius was pushing too hard.
Sure, Moons, I'll drop it.
Thank you.
Remus turned and made toward the bathroom.
Now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to try and drown myself in the shower.
Sirius moved out of his way, but couldn't stop himself from following down the hall as another thought occurred to him.
Have you had a lot of prostate orgasms?
Sirius, oh my God.
Remus shouted.
Well, I was just wondering. You seem to have some basis for comparison. I wasn't sure how much you knew.
Remus slammed the bathroom door in his face and turned on some music, blaring it from the Bluetooth speaker Sirius stored in their shared bathroom. Apparently, he would be taking no further questions. That was fine. It had been a while since Sirius frequented the gym anyway. He'd just go along when James finally convinced Remus to start things back up and figure it out himself. It took Remus 2 weeks and a shoulder sprain before he agreed to let James train him again. James gave Sirius an odd look when he met them at the door with his shoes and a protein shake, but he didn't argue when Sirius volunteered to drive. Sirius joined them in walking a couple laps around the track, then flung himself next to Remus on the mat as James started on warm-up stretches. Remus laid on his stomach, head propped on one arm, wincing and grimacing at the pressure of the foam roller James pushed up and down his calves.
Easy, Prongs, you're hurting him.
Sirius barked through the triangle between his thighs and his right calf. He didn't really have a plan for this workout. He was just freestyling as he tried to spy on Remus's ab routine, but figure fours felt magical on his hips and arched cheeks, so it seemed like a good place to start.
He's fine.
Remus grunted the lie into his forearm, cracking one eye open to scold Sirius for speaking up on his behalf.
I'm just sore because I've barely moved the last 2 weeks. I'll never stop being irritated that exercise makes me less sore, by the way. I rather wish you hadn't told me that.
Sirius chuckled and switched legs.
Sorry we're helping you feel better.
If it means I have to do this multiple days a week, yeah, you should be. I used to have a lie-in on Saturdays, you know.
Remus muttered, then groaned as James moved up to his hamstrings.
Shit, Prongs.
We could go in the evening if that works better for you, Mooney. I told you that.
James said, ignoring Remus's complaint entirely.
You're already doing so, much for me. I'm not going to change the only morning routine you've known since you were 15.
Remus argued. Sirius met James's eyes behind his back and gave them an exaggerated roll. Their Mooney, always the martyr. It wouldn't be any use arguing with him about such a thing, though, so Sirius let it go.
All right, Moons, up you get.
James gave him a smack on the bum. He'd always be a football player at heart.
Remember what we talked about. Just because
my body can go there doesn't mean it should go there. I know.
Remus recited back as he rolled over and dragged himself to his feet.
You and every doctor and physio I've ever seen have made that abundantly clear.
Lycra-covered legs and a hinged knee brace wandered into Sirius's field of vision. They were very soon joined by his head and entire torso as he flopped his body neatly in half in an exaggerated forward fold.
Mooney,
James cried.
what did we just say? Mindful stretches, for the love of God. Quick, where do you feel that?
In my lower back.
He answered, the duh apparent in his tone. James made a buzzer sound.
Wrong. That's for your hamstrings. Back it off. Use your core to stabilize and focus on your bloody hamstrings. We're doing legs today.
Remus huffed as he obeyed, shaking his head and mouthing,
Twat.
to Sirius on his way up. Sirius grinned.
You are the only mother hen I've ever known who also sounds like a drill sergeant.
He observed from his spot on the floor. He'd moved on to arms or something. He wasn't really thinking about it. He was far too focused on watching Prongs and Mooney snipe at each other to worry about himself.
Yes, well, I'd only sound like a drill sergeant if Mooney paid even a little bit of attention to what he was doing. I'm forced to mother hen him because he has no sense of self-preservation.
James griped. Remus scoffed.
That's part of my disability, arsehole. I can't tell what I'm not supposed to do.
Which is why I reminded you of exactly that thing right before you completely ignored me, you tit.
James explained, exasperated.
I know this is the easy part for you, but that makes it easier to get injured. Can you please focus?
The gym is boring.
Remus grumbled, just loud enough for Sirius to hear. Sirius huffed a quiet laugh. He didn't disagree. The gym was fucking boring, which was why he hadn't been in ages, but it was charming when Remus was petulant about it. After a few more rounds of stretching and multiple scoldings from James, Sirius for distracting Remus, Remus for getting distracted, they finally moved off the mats. Sirius tried to follow them to the squat rack, but James shooed him away.
He doesn't need 2 spotters pads. We'll be here all day if we travel in a pack. And Mooney starts getting testy around the 45-minute mark.
You always say you design the workouts for half an hour, and then we're here all bloody morning.
Remus huffed.
The smoothie bar is not lunch, James.
Your diet was mostly cigarettes and milky tea until about 6 months ago, Moons. A smoothie should be a well-balanced meal by your standards.
Sirius teased.
What happened?
I graduated and got a job. I can afford real food now. And I quit smoking because I could barely walk the 2 flights of stairs to our flat. Turns out cigarettes are an appetite suppressant, so I'm hungry now. Who knew?
Remus shrugged.
Literally everyone, mate.
James shook his head.
If you can afford food now, why do you still only eat beans and toast?
Just because he can buy it doesn't mean he knows how to cook it.
Sirius snickered.
Hey, shove off. It's not like you're much better.
Remus complained, elbowing a still giggling Sirius and knocking him off balance.
Posh servant having wanker.
Sirius put an offended hand to his chest with a gasp.
Excuse me, I can cook. Mum and Dad taught us before we started uni. My curry is better than James's.
I haven't seen any evidence of that.
Remus arched a skeptical brow.
Oh, bollocks, I'll make some. You'll see.
Sirius argued. A sly grin pulled at Remus's lips.
Perfect.
Oh, fuck off. You could have just asked,
Sirius grumbled, stomping off to his own workout in a strop over Remus, having tricked him into cooking. Sirius didn't really have a goal in mind, other than to see what Mooney did on the captain's chair so he could mimic it, so he wandered to the dumbbells and set himself up so he could keep an eye on James and Remus. He did some deadlifts while Mooney squatted against the wall with an exercise ball for support, and James almost lost his balance trying to squat so deeply his arse nearly touched his heels. Sirius curled as Remus did hip hinges, and James once again tapped him in the stomach. The admonishment to use his abs played itself in Sirius's mind, even if he couldn't hear it. Sirius walked between cable machines before deciding he didn't want to use any of them, then grabbed a drink from the fountain. By the time he was done, Remus and James were back on the mats and doing some kind of twists with resistance bands. Sirius eyed their position on the far wall, through the dense tangle of metal bars and gym bros, and over to the captain's chair on the other side of the room. He didn't want Remus to see him try it. He'd definitely think Sirius was mocking him if he caught him. But they seemed occupied enough to risk it, and maybe Sirius could figure it out on his own. His curiosity would be satisfied, and he wouldn't have to tag along to the gym again. He sauntered confidently across the padded floor and backed into the machine, not bothering with the foot bars as he hopped up to grab the handles and landed with a jolt on his forearms. Wincing at the impact, he braced himself against the backrest and let his feet dangle. What was it Prongs had said? Mooney was doing flutter kicks and advanced to knee raises. That seemed easy enough. Sirius had played football with James all through secondary. He was familiar with weight room basics. Sure, fine, he spent most of their strength training days staring at Kingsley Shacklebolt's arse in the mirrors, but if there was one thing the experience taught him, it was proper form. Sirius pulled his knees up to his stomach, then let them drop. Then he did it again, and again, and again, until he lost count and the front of his hips and his lower back got sore. His abs were tired too, but there wasn't so much as a tingle behind his navel. Whatever Mooney had been doing, it must not have been this. He let himself drop with a huff and stalked back to the locker room to get his things. This was stupid, and there was a smoothie bar in the lobby. He could wait there while James and Remus finished up. Chapter 2. Over the next few weeks, Sirius made a habit of joining Remus and James at the gym. He'd meet them at the door every day except Tuesday, which they skipped because James insisted rest days were vital to recovery, and Remus insisted Tuesdays sucked enough. No need to make them worse by working out, with a killer playlist and a sense of unshakable determination. He hadn't made any progress on the elusive flaccid orgasm yet, and Prongs wouldn't let him cajole Mooney into giving him a demonstration of his technique, but that was fine. Sirius could play the long game. James would get Remus back on the chair at some point, and when he did, Sirius would be ready. Meanwhile, he bided his time and tried to make the most of his new morning routine, the days blurring into each other as they swam by. Day 3. Some beefy bastard with tiny shorts and an even tinier head was really pissing Sirius off. He'd set himself up on the cable machine specifically because it faced the spot on the mats where James had Remus on a balance ball. And then this meathead positioned himself smack in the middle of his eyeline to do his curls. It was like he did it on purpose, making sure Sirius couldn't see around his thick neck and overly defined shoulders. Gross. He was on his third set of goblet squats when Deltoid Dave caught his eye and fucking winked. Sirius physically recoiled, as though he would ever be interested in a roided-out, shrunken-dicked Love Island reject like that. He probably snorted lines of pre-workout and used his fingers to count macros. There was nothing that bloke could possibly be packing that would make him appealing. Sirius leveled him with an icy glare, gave him a once-over, and found him wanting. Of course he had chicken legs. Men with double D-cup pecs never believed in the importance of leg day. Sirius set his mouth in the coldest, Wahlberga-taught sneer he knew and stared through the guy like he didn't exist. DD seemed to take Sirius's attempts to make him invisible as encouragement. By the time he had started his deadlifts, Dave felt it imperative to his future happiness to approach Sirius, like some kind of arsehole. How did these guys never learn that people don't like to be hit on at the gym? Sirius refused to take out his headphones, the universal symbol for leave me the fuck alone, so Deltoid Dave's voice came through muffled. Unfortunately, it was still audible.
Hey, I saw you from across the room, and I needed to come over here and tell you how sexy you are.
Disgusting. Sirius pointed to his earbuds and shook his head.
I can't hear you.
He mouthed, then increased the volume of his music.
I needed to come over and tell you how sexy you are.
Dave repeated, raising his voice a couple notches in an attempt to be heard.
What?
Sirius mouthed, turning his screen so Dave could watch him make his music even louder, wondering if he would have to blast his own eardrums out before this guy took the hint.
I said you're sexy.
Dave shouted. All motion stopped as every eye in the room turned to stare at them. Dave's shoulders curled in embarrassment at the sudden attention, a new flush working its way down his neck. Finally, Sirius paused his playlist.
Yeah, I know,
he said flatly.
Were you looking for tips or something? I'd suggest adding in some squats once in a while. You look like you're fighting a losing battle with gravity.
What?
He sputtered.
You're top-heavy,
Sirius explained.
The pyramids were built with the wide part on the bottom for a reason, you know. Maybe work on your base so you don't tip over.
A loud snort echoed across the room. Sirius's eyes flicked over Dave's shoulder to meet Remus's, lips twitching at his friend's reactions. Mooney's shoulders shook with barely contained laughter, and James's fist was nearly stuffed in his mouth to hold his in. Sirius pulled out one earbud and called out to them.
You two done? Ready to get out of here?
Yeah, we're good.
Remus jerked his head toward the locker room, his tone laced with suppressed amusement.
Great.
Sirius grabbed the spray and quickly wiped down his machine, then stepped around the dumbstruck gym bro in his way.
See you around, Dave.
My name's Adrian.
He mumbled, looking like he wanted to crawl in a hole and die. Good. Sirius blinked slowly, letting Dave see him decide whether he deigned to acknowledge it, before responding in the least enthusiastic monotone he could muster.
Cool.
Then he stalked off to join his friends, ruffling Remus's hair and shoving at a cackling James's shoulder as they walked away, leaving the awkwardness of the encounter to follow Dave around like a bad smell. Day 8. Finally, Prongs let Sirius join him and Mooney on their circuits instead of banishing him across the room to fend for himself. Sirius was already having more fun, and they hadn't even touched a weight yet. He'd gotten to spend the entire warm-up taking the piss out of Prongs for his shirt being cut open all the way to his waist. He and Mooney decided his nipples should be named Pinky and the Brain, since they were determined to take over the world. Then they spent 5 minutes not listening at all as he explained the back and shoulder workout he'd planned, getting thoroughly distracted when he said the phrase,
Power snatch.
and never quite regaining their focus. When he had to correct Remus's form for lifting his arms to shoulder height 3 times, because apparently there was a wrong way to do that, he finally snapped.
See, Padfoot, this is why I make you go by yourself. I can't manage the two of you together. You're just such.
James paused, face screwed up as he searched for a word to describe how devastating Sirius's presence was to their routine.
Such giggle buddies.
Sirius barked a loud laugh that drew looks from half the gym. and Remus turned to muffle his guffaw in his shoulder.
Giggle buddies.
Remus asked, incredulous.
That's the best you could do.
Well, I don't know, look at you.
James waved a frustrated hand at where they still stood, half holding each other up in their collective fit of laughter.
Can't get him to do a bloody thing when you're here.
To be fair, you can barely get him to do a bloody thing when I'm not here either,
Sirius argued.
Hey,
James and Remus cried together.
I do things.
Remus bristled.
He does. I'm a good coach.
James defended. Sirius couldn't argue with that. He was pretty sure Remus had gone down to 1 or 2 injuries a month recently, where he used to have a joint out of place at least once a week. Sometime in the last 10 years, it had become routine for Sirius to hear Remus swearing a blue streak from 3 rooms away, and he'd know he needed to grab some ibuprofen, muscle relaxers, and a hot water bottle from the medicine cabinet. They'd spend the rest of the day huddled together on the sofa, watching comedies as a distraction, while Sirius tried to gently massage his thumb or his shoulder until it could slip back into its socket. It didn't matter how many times it happened, and it didn't matter how much Sirius enjoyed their afternoons spent side by side under an Afghan crocheted by Remus's ma'am. It still scared the shit out of him every time, and he vividly remembered every one of their semi-annual trips to A&E when the usual tricks didn't work. Sirius was grateful Prongs was dragging Mooney to the gym, even if their stubborn friend complained about it endlessly.
Yeah, that's true.
Sirius granted, giving James credit where it was due.
Damn right it is.
James nodded. He snapped his fingers and pointed at Remus.
Rose, Mooney. You half-assed the arm raises, but you did them. Next circuit.
After a few reps, James nodded his satisfaction and made his way to the pull-up bar. Sirius trailed behind him, picking up some free weights as James hauled his body up and down.
How do you know how to do all this stuff anyway?
Sirius grunted, pressing his weights overhead.
You did a business degree.
James laughed.
I took as many of the physiotherapy courses as I could for electives, and I audited the rest.
I didn't know that.
Sirius squawked.
How did I miss that? Why'd you do it?
James dropped to the floor and shook out his arms.
Started because I didn't want to be one of those blokes who blew out a knee playing intramural football at 20, so thought I'd try to learn how to keep myself healthy. Kept going because it was interesting, and I thought it might help him.
He jerked his head toward Remus.
Oh,
Sirius said, tilting his head as he studied his best friend.
wasn't that a ton of work?
Yeah, kinda.
James shrugged.
We all have our things. You know how to play nurse and have a whole supply closet of first aid things for him. Same problem, different solution.
He hopped up to catch the bar and resumed his pull-ups.
Bum in, Mooney.
He called from the top of his rep. A weary, beleaguered sigh sounded from over Sirius's shoulder. He turned to see Remus readjusting his stance, brow furrowed, as he concentrated on tucking his pelvis under and stabilizing with his core. He was also pretty sure Remus was giving James the finger through the handle of the resistance band he was using. But hey, small victories. Day 20. Sirius had been going to the gym 6 days a week for 3 full weeks now, and he still hadn't caught Mooney on the captain's chair. To be fair, James hadn't tried to get him to do it again since the incident, so it's not like Sirius would have had an opportunity. At least he hadn't wasted all his time, though. He was pretty sure he'd figured out what he was doing wrong on his last attempt. Apparently, based on the words James's voice echoed in his brain 24/7, like the world's worst song had made a permanent home there, Sirius hadn't been bracing his core enough. He snuck over to the machine again, staying out of Remus's eye line so he wouldn't get all embarrassed and stop the routine that was keeping his bones tied together, and hopped up on the foot bars.
Bum in, Mooney.
Sirius tilted the bottom of his hips up and felt his lower back press flat against the backrest.
Use your core to stabilize.
Sirius let his feet dangle, making sure he could hold himself in place without too much effort before he started to move.
Focus.
Sirius knew he didn't have to think about the way his body was holding itself nearly as hard as Mooney did, but he still needed to concentrate to maintain his form. He definitely hadn't been doing it right last time. If he'd learned anything from James's shouting over the last few weeks, it was that nobody is ever really supposed to feel much in their lower back. He was going to do it right and make sure he was using his abs, and only his abs, to raise and lower his legs. So he focused, and he made sure every movement came from his stomach, not momentum or his legs or his back or his neck or his fucking eyebrows. And it sucked. It was a positively miserable experience, his knees knocking together as he fought against the irresistible pull of gravity, using only his core and sheer willpower. And still, after all that, after 3 weeks of stinking mats and early mornings, after 3 sets of trembling effort, nothing, not so much as a dribble from his stupid, stubborn cock. Day 25.
3, 4, 5.
Sirius snuck a peek at where James had Remus lying prone on the mats, arms stretched overhead as he lifted and lowered his lanky limbs. They were doing core work today, which put Sirius on high alert for a movement anywhere near the captain's chair. So far, they hadn't moved from the spot where Sirius left them when he was done stretching, but he wasn't about to miss it.
7, 8.
Few exercises were more satisfying to Sirius than split squats. The stretch across the front of his right hip when he lowered, the burning work in the left side of his bum when he pushed back up to the top, the way everything always was a little tighter at the end of the motion. They made him feel like he was experiencing muscle growth in real time. He was pretty certain he could crush a kumquat between his arched cheeks right now. They were so strong.
10. Was that 10? Shit. Fuck.
He'd done 12 on the other side, and he didn't want to be walking around with a lopsided arse. Did he have 2 more left? No, he'd counted number 10 again whilst he was freaking out about his count. Shit. Fuck it. Sirius did 1 more squat, then racked his barbell. He'd done the same thing last week, when James had told him about kettlebell ladders. He was doing his swings, adding 1 more to each set until he got to 20 and then counting down again. But he got lost somewhere around 16 when he got bored and his mind started to wander. He managed to do 3 sets of 13 on the way back down without noticing until it was too late and called it good enough. The week before that, he'd suddenly tuned back into his curls when his left arm turned to jelly, and he had no idea how long he'd been going.
God damn it.
From now on, every movement had to be on both sides at the same time, or he wasn't doing that exercise at all. And everything had to be heavy enough that he never needed to go over 10, preferably 8. Fuck, Sirius hated the gym. Working out was boring. Day 33.
Come on, Mooney, knees up. We're trying to work on your balance.
Sirius cajoled as he watched Remus step on and off the little box on the floor in front of him.
Everyone knows you're cheating if you don't at least bring them up to your waist.
Never mind that Sirius didn't know if that was true, and also wasn't one to talk about putting in adequate effort. He was currently leaning against the free weight rack, drinking a smoothie he'd smuggled in from the lobby and pestering his friend.
He's supposed to focus on control first and foremost. If he can't control it, he shouldn't do it. You know this.
James scolded, planting his body firmly between Remus and Sirius and glaring at him with his hands on his hips.
You can just leave if you're not going to be helpful.
I'm helping.
Sirius argued, trying to catch Remus's eye.
Mooney, tell him I'm helping.
You're not.
Remus said flatly. Sirius scoffed.
I most certainly am. I'm here to encourage you.
You're here to wander in circles and chat shit.
James corrected.
If running your mouth counted as cardio, you'd be an Olympic marathoner.
Sirius wiped his finger along the side of his condensating cup and flicked it at Prongs' face.
Fuck off.
Why did you come along today?
Remus asked, pausing with his left foot on the box and his right knee in the air, doing his best to stop his ankle from wobbling.
Did you even bring your shoes?
He hadn't, actually. He was sore from the day before. His headphones were dead, and he'd already burned the agreed-upon 1 day a week. James allowed him to work out with them on Wednesday. It sounded miserable, so Sirius hadn't wanted to. But he also was used to being up by this time, and a morning at home by himself sounded boring and lonely if he couldn't sleep through it. Besides, what if today was the day James put Remus back on the captain's chair? Sirius slurped up the rest of his smoothie, the straw rattling obnoxiously against the bottom of the plastic cup as he sucked it dry.
Breakfast. You know I can't resist a blueberry acai in the morning.
Day 41. This is nice, Sirius thought, much to his own surprise. He'd had a long week at work, his client having no idea how requesting just one little change fucked up everything downstream that then needed hours of work to fix. The frustration had left him keyed up and restless, so he decided today was a good day to turn off his brain and go for a run. He'd hopped on the treadmill when they'd finished their stretches, and Prongs had banished him to solitude. Sirius chose this specific machine intentionally, settling himself in the front row of the gym's second level, so it overlooked the weight room below. He was tucked away in the corner so he had a bird's-eye view and could track Remus and James through their routine while remaining unobtrusive and forgettable himself. It was ab day again. Sirius had learned through Prongs' pep talk as he rubbed Mooney's leg muscles loose, and Sirius just had a good feeling. This was it. This was the day James was going to get Remus back on the magical orgasm machine. The machine Sirius had tried half a dozen times in the interim, so certain he'd be able to replicate the results for himself, but always coming up short.
Ha! Coming. Or more accurately, not coming.
Sirius chuckled at his own joke, a quick huff around his deep, steady breaths. Sirius loved running. He'd forgotten that in his time away from the gym. He wasn't fast, his broad chest and bulky muscles made much more for lifting than any kind of cardio, but his mind loved it. It was like setting his body in motion turned off his brain and reduced it to its most basic animalistic parts. Breathing, one foot in front of the other, on and on as long as he could go, until he was gasping and his heart raced. Maybe it was some vestigial sense from hunter-gatherer times. His body was tricking his mind into believing he was running from a saber-toothed tiger and not wasting space on any other worry. Were people alive at the same time as saber-toothed tigers? Maybe it was woolly mammoths he was thinking of, though woolly mammoths were more the hunted, not the hunters. It'd be wicked to see a woolly mammoth charge a bunch of cavemen, though. Even if its goal was survival, not food, those fuckers were big. They'd have been able to do some damage. Sirius wrinkled his nose at the thought of it. Okay, maybe wicked was a bit of a strong choice. Fascinating. Gruesome. Like that zombie series Mooney had gotten him to watch in uni, in exchange for dragging him along for moral support the first half-dozen times he saw Regulus after his younger brother moved out of their parents' house. Zombies. Maybe that was his imaginary pursuer. His brain was focused on keeping ahead of the undead horde. He snorted. It would make Mooney laugh to know the show that had kept Sirius up at night for weeks after they stopped watching it was still coming back to haunt him 5 years later. He'd have to remember to tell him when they were done working out. And just like that, Sirius's mind zoomed back in on what he was supposed to be doing. Spying. Keeping an eye on James and Remus's whereabouts so he could watch what Remus did on the machine that supposedly makes people come. Sirius skimmed over the floor below until he spotted his friends at the captain's chair, where Remus had just gotten down and then walked away. Fuck. Sirius and his stupid wandering mind. He'd been following them around like a lost puppy for weeks, and he still somehow missed his opportunity. What an idiot. He squinted and tried to read Remus's face. Did he look orgasmic? Was he traversing the gym with an air of divine post-nut clarity that made working out less of a slog? His cheeks were rather pink, and his hair was a sweaty mess, but those things were both par for the course for mid-exercise. Good. Sirius hadn't missed anything too important, and he'd be more on top of things the next time. It was an endless, dull cycle of picking up heavy shit and putting it back down. Deadlift after bicep curl after squat to press, one blurring into the next in a monotonous run that felt like it lasted roughly the same eternity that his planks did. Eventually, though, it stopped feeling like a secret mission, and it started feeling like a normal part of his day. Get up, trail James and Remus around the gym, either literally or just with his eyes so they'd know he'd resent being left out if they happened to glance his way. Grab a smoothie for breakfast, go home together on the weekend or shower in the locker room and head their separate ways to work during the week. It was kind of nice. Even if he'd never tell James he liked it, he was comfortable in his new routine.
Oh, just fuck off.
What?
Sirius asked, looking from Remus's pink cheeks and frowning face down to the towel tied loosely around his own waist and back. Remus shook his head and tried to turn away.
Nothing.
No, what did I do?
He pressed. Remus sighed.
You've been doing this for, what, a month and a half?
About that long, yeah.
Sirius agreed.
Right. So you've been doing this for less time than it takes me to get into my rheumatologist's office. And you already look like that.
Remus waved an irritated hand at Sirius.
You have a bloody Adonis belt, for fuck's sake.
Sirius's body did look different, he had to admit. His jeans were a little looser around the waist and a little tighter across the thighs. He could sometimes feel his bum jiggle when he walked, and the seam on the bicep of one of his dress shirts had popped a few stitches last week. And yes, his hips did cut a sharp V at the bottom of his torso, pointing like an arrow to his cock. He wasn't sure why that was a cause for Remus to be annoyed with him, though.
Yeah, so what?
So what? He says.
Remus scoffed.
James has been torturing me 6 days a week for the last 6 months, and
he gestured to himself from fluffy curls to sandaled feet. That didn't help Sirius at all.
Yes. And I'm not understanding, Moons. Explain like I'm 5.
I still look like this.
Sirius cocked his head and looked at his friend. Really looked. At the miles of freckled skin he knew from experience were velvety soft, crisscrossed with silvery scars, where the delicate tissue hadn't been treated as gently as it needed. At the big hands resting on crossed arms, forearms tensing along with the rest of him. At the trail of tawny hair that ran below his navel and disappeared into the towel wrapped around his slim hips. The towel barely reached his mid-thigh, partially because it was minuscule to make it easy to pack in his gym bag, and partially due to his mile-long legs. He wasn't muscular, no, but he was toned, he was thriving, and he was altogether lovely.
I like the way you look,
he stated honestly.
You don't need to take the piss about it.
Remus huffed and turned back to his locker, slipping on his pants and trousers in a rush before letting his towel drop. Sirius frowned.
I wasn't,
he muttered, though he didn't think Remus heard.
Damn it.
Sirius was out of shampoo, not out. He had a new bottle in the bag on his dresser, which was in his bedroom, which didn't do him much good here and now when his hair was already soaked. He thought about getting out anyway, dripping a trail from the shower and down the hall, but then he'd inevitably forget to wipe it up and get a huff and an eye roll from his most exasperated flatmate. Sorry, Sirius was forgetful, Remus. Also, that sounded rather cold. Plan B, then. Steal some from Mooney. He looked on Remus's shelf in the shower and reconsidered his plan when he saw the bottle of 3 in 1 staring back at him.
Come on, Moons,
he murmured to himself. That boy had curls and they deserved better. They lived with the future CEO of a hair care company, for fuck's sake. James could bring him some samples. Sirius resigned himself to an awful hair day and picked up the cursed product, grinning when it revealed a little brown bottle tucked behind. Wicked. He picked it up and read the label. Shampoo as expected, and expensive too. Sirius recognized the brand. Mooney would never buy this on his own, and it was a travel-sized bottle. Sirius would wager good money it was a gift. He'd buy a full size to replace it next time he went to Boots. Sirius clicked open the cap and squeezed a small dollop in his hand. It didn't feel right. It was clear and runny, with nary a sud in sight. Instead, when he rubbed his hands together, they glided right past each other without the slightest pull of friction. Because this was lube. Remus was hiding lube in their shower. Nice, quality silicone-based lube, if the way it refused to rinse off his slick fingers was any indicator. This wasn't basic pulling off. Quick wank to start the day lube. It was made for longer use, for opening up, for taking the time to work fingers or, oh God, a toy inside a tight, needy hole.
Like a prostate orgasm.
Remus's voice floated, unbidden, through his mind. Fuck, how long had Mooney been hiding this in here? Sirius found himself studying the tiles, tilting his head this way and that, like he'd be able to suss out if something had recently been suction cupped to the wall. It's not like he thought Remus never had sex. Of course he did. He was a good-looking bloke. Sirius had actually thought multiple times over the years that he got laid significantly less often than a gentleman of his caliber deserved. He'd just never allowed himself to consider Mooney's preferences before. It hadn't come up, wasn't relevant to their friendship. They weren't shagging each other, for God's sake. So why would Sirius care about the fact that Remus apparently liked to bottom enough to buy expensive lube and store it permanently in their shared shower? And now the answer to a question he never asked was all over Sirius's hands. Which? It would be a shame to waste it, Sirius supposed. He hadn't intended to steal Remus's posh lube, but it was too late for that now, and Sirius's cock was begging for its morning wank anyway. He didn't have the time, or the patience, if he was being honest, to bother using it properly and finger himself this morning. Now that he'd noticed how hard he was, he couldn't focus on anything else. He took himself in hand, breath hitching as he ran his thumb over his leaking slit. He tried to work himself slowly, running his palm over the head and squeezing lightly as he moved down his shaft, but Sirius had never been very good at taking his time. In no time at all, he found himself with one arm propped against the shower, steamy air filled with his panting breaths as he fucked his own fist. He spilled against the wall with a muffled grunt, shuddering and biting his own arm to stop himself from crying out. The evidence of both his orgasm and his crime swirling down the drain, Sirius still needed to steal Remus's bloody awful 3-in-1 to wash his hair. At least it smelled nice. Sandalwood and vanilla, though it felt a little lackluster, like it was missing some of the depth Sirius instinctively expected. Whatever. It was fine for one day. Sirius was still going to buy Remus a big bottle of the nice shampoo, though. He'd be so embarrassed, wondering if Sirius discovered his secret stash. It'd be hilarious. Chapter 3. It was all Prongs' fault. Him and his incessant reminders. The phrase wriggled itself so deep into Sirius's subconscious, it built a nest in his neurons.
Bum in, Mooney.
It didn't help matters that Remus was incapable of carrying James's coaching out into the greater world. It was almost impressive the way his awareness of his body flipped on and off like a switch as soon as they swiped into the gym. He'd approach the entry in his usual Mooney slouch, cross the threshold, and grow 3 inches as he straightened his spine. Then, on the way out, the same would happen in reverse. It was like the threat of James shouting in his ear for the next hour was enough to scare him straight. Between the quiet refrain that ran on a loop in the back of Sirius's mind and Remus's tendency to inhabit his body closer to a marionette on a string than an actual human man, Sirius couldn't help but notice when Mooney stood wrong. Always with one hip cocked and the knee locked, or a foot resting on his other leg, or his back arched so far it looked painful. He'd been doing it for as long as Sirius had known him, but now that he knew Remus was doing something that felt good in the moment, but hurt him in the long run, he struggled to stop himself from helping.
Bum in, Mooney.
He scolded, pinching Remus's arse gently as he squeezed behind him in the bathroom. Remus squawked his disapproval and spat toothpaste all over the mirror, but he did shift his weight so his knee wouldn't be sore in 5 minutes.
Bum in, Mooney.
Sirius said a couple days later as Remus stood by the stove heating the tinned soup he was making for supper. Remus flipped him the V and continued stirring the pot. Sirius sighed and waited until he set down his spoon, then poked him in the arse cheek.
You're going to hurt yourself, you stubborn prat. Also, that looks disgusting. Do I need to start feeding you so you'll eat something decent?
You could, or you could fuck off. That would be fine too.
Remus suggested. Sirius laughed.
Seems like a long shot, but I'll keep it in mind.
It floated through his mind again later that evening as they sat on the couch watching telly when Remus's legs were curled underneath his body like a bloody pretzel and he was sitting on his feet.
Stop sitting like that. You're going to put your hip out, you Burke.
I'm tired, Padfoot. Just let me be comfortable.
Remus complained.
You're not my man.
It's good to know Hope would tell you the same. It means I'm right. Just lie down.
Sirius argued.
I'm fine, stop worrying. We can't both fit here if I'm horizontal.
Remus waved Sirius's concern away. Sirius huffed and slid onto the floor, settling in with his legs outstretched, back resting against the front of the couch and arms crossed petulantly. They sat in mutually resentful silence until finally Remus shifted behind him.
You're such an obstinate shit.
He grumbled, his voice right behind Sirius's ear. Legs stretched long in Sirius's periphery, and he smiled. It grew even wider when Remus let out a contented sigh that ghosted across the back of his neck.
Feel better?
He asked.
Shut up and watch your show, you smug bastard.
Remus said.
It's bread week.
Sirius did as he was told, letting his head drop back on the cushion by Mooney's chest. He watched the baker's knead and proof through half-closed lids and turned into a relaxed puddle when long fingers started twirling his hair and scratching at his scalp.
This is nice,
he thought just before he dozed off. The way Remus insisted on abusing his own body drove Sirius half-mad, and he couldn't help intervening. At some point, it became such a habit, Sirius stopped saying it out loud. He'd walk into a room, sigh quietly, and give Remus a little goose. Mooney would jump and swat his hand away with an exasperated huff, and, if he thought Sirius wasn't looking, a crooked little smile. Then he'd fix his posture and extend his joint life for 5 extra years. It was a bit of an unusual system, but it worked.
Morning, Remus.
The trainer hovering near the door said with a warm smile.
Have a good weekend?
Hey, Eddie. Yeah, it was all right.
Remus nodded, tucking his phone into his pocket.
How about you?
Decent. Went to a concert on Friday night. I'm still recovering.
The man Eddie laughed.
Lucky client you're waiting on. Might go easy on them for once.
Remus joked. Eddie waved him off with a grin.
Nah, that's not what they pay me for.
Wait, you're getting paid?
James asked, turning to Remus with a shit-eating grin.
Did you know they pay people to do this, Mooney?
Yes, James, you're very generous.
Remus rolled his eyes.
Have a good day, Bones.
You too.
The trainer said, still smiling at Mooney. Sirius glared after him.
What was his deal?
James snorted.
What? Being friendly whilst at work? Unconscionable.
Friendly? To who? He didn't so much as acknowledge me.
Sirius complained. He'd been plenty friendly with Mooney, though. Even James was barely a blip on his radar. Only Remus was worthy of his time, it seemed. He turned to glare at Remus.
What's Bones? What kind of stupid nickname is that?
Is his last name Padfoot, so not all that clever?
Remus explained in a tone that told Sirius he was being ridiculous.
I wonder why he didn't acknowledge you. You seem so close. What with you not even knowing his last name? Have you ever spoken to him before?
Sirius shook his head, annoyed by the very prospect.
No, have you?
Yeah.
Remus laughed.
We'd been coming here for months before you started showing up. We ran into each other once in a while. It's called small talk, Pads. You should try it sometime. It makes people less afraid of you.
Why would I want that?
Sirius asked haughtily. He liked it when people left him alone. Deltoid Dave served as proof. James clapped him on the shoulder.
Some people just like other people, Pads. As a general concept. Might be nice to try that too.
I like you two plenty.
Sirius argued.
I like your girlfriend better than you at this exact moment. Lily's fun and you're a prick. And Regulus and I are well past just tolerating each other these days. Why do I need other people?
You don't, but you could have some anyway.
Remus suggested. Sirius didn't think he was interested in that, especially not if they were going to be encroaching on his friends. No, thank you.
No, I just want you.
He said firmly. Remus shrugged and looked away, his cheeks a little pink.
Suit yourself.
Sirius would suit himself, even if that meant being in a bit of a strop about it. He quietly stewed through his entire workout, and it was his workout since James abandoned him to his own devices, which just so happened to be the devices directly adjacent to the ones he and Remus were using, and every bloody person who walked by seemed to have something to say.
Hi, Remus.
A woman with straight dark hair and a wide smile said.
All right, mate.
A tall man who had to work as either a bouncer or personal security greeted with a nod as he reached around Remus for the cleaning wipes. A long, lean, annoyingly handsome black man with a fresh fade and stretchy joggers dragged his eyes over Remus from head to toe before catching his eye with a soft,
Hey!
It rankled Sirius. Who were all of these people? Couldn't they see Remus was busy? He didn't require their help or attention. He and James were already occupied. They were interrupting. Why did no one have any sense of personal space anymore? There was no good reason for them to insert themselves in Mooney and Prongs' training. And the worst part was it never seemed to quit. If anything, it got worse. Every day a new face would walk by and take up some of James and Remus's time. Time Remus already hated spending here, by the way. He barely wanted to show up in the first place. And now Dancer Lim's McStretchy Joggers, whose name was Benji, apparently, as he told them all the 4th day he made a point to wander by, was pulling his attention away from his workout. Mooney needed to focus. That was the whole point. He had to think about what his body was doing. It wasn't instinctive. He didn't need to waste 5 minutes and valuable brain space chatting with these people. It was so rude, so entitled of them to infringe on Remus's time and energy. But Mooney didn't like it when Sirius snapped at strangers, and James made fun of him every time he tried to interfere. He'd call him Cujo, or ask him to refill their water bottles, then tell Sirius he's so good at playing fetch when he brought them back. It made Sirius irritable and squirmy, and he considered quitting the gym altogether, except this was his habit now, and he begrudgingly liked it. He slept better, he felt better, his body looked amazing, and he was in a better mood pretty much any time he wasn't stuck here watching strangers annoy Prongs and Mooney. It really was fucking irritating that exercise made him feel good. He and Remus agreed on that. So he kept his mouth shut, grinding his teeth, and limiting himself to menacing glares, instead of telling everybody who got within 5 feet of his friends to bugger off. The only good thing about it was James noticing he was doing a better job of letting Mooney stay on task, which meant he at least got to work out alongside them most of the time. It was less fun than annoying Prongs into submission, but Sirius could stop himself from snarling at other gym-goers as an exchange. Until he couldn't. It wasn't his fault. He'd been so patient all morning. It was Saturday, so Prongs indulged himself, and Sirius and Mooney, by extension, in a longer workout than usual. There were an obscene number of people around, and Sirius had to bear an extra 15 minutes of tight-abbed girls in sports bras and scrunch-bum leggings, of blokes in baggy shorts and shredded cutoffs, of bloody Benji stopping by their machines to natter on and ogle Remus. One of them asked him where he bought his water bottle. Fucking unbelievable. So when Kara, the girl working at the smoothie stand when they stopped for breakfast, started chatting Remus up, Sirius lost it.
Hey, James. Hey, Remus. Looks like you guys worked hard today.
The pretty blonde said with a smile. Her eyes ran from Remus's sweaty hairline, down his torso and arms, to where his waist dipped behind the counter before flicking back up again. Remus shrugged.
It wasn't too bad. Have you been busy?
Yeah.
Kara laughed.
Saturday morning. Pretty much everybody under age 30 is hoping for some miracle cure for their hangover.
And they've chosen smoothies.
Remus asked.
The thing with the blenders. For their hangovers.
Kara laughed again.
That's what I said. You get it. Congratulations on being smarter than all the other people who come here.
Sirius scoffed. Of course, Mooney was smarter than the average jock who frequented the smoothie stand. But Kara worked here too, so he wasn't sure what she was on her high horse about.
Not smarter, just more experienced.
Remus said with a wink.
Jesus?
Sirius muttered and rolled his eyes. James whacked him in the stomach.
Shut it, Padfoot.
Kara leaned a sharp hip bone against the counter and looked up at Remus from under her lashes as she bit her lip.
So, what can I get for you today? Anything you want?
May I please have a large peanut butter and banana smoothie?
Remus ordered. Kara frowned, looking a bit taken aback, but she nodded.
Sure. Anything else?
Remus looked over his shoulder to Sirius and James.
No, I'm going to Lily's. We're getting lunch.
James shook his head. Sirius did rather want something, but he didn't want to stand here for an extra 5 minutes, whilst Kara flirted shamelessly with Mooney instead of doing her job, so he shook his head too.
Just me then, thanks.
Remus said.
Lucky me.
Kara simpered, still smiling up at him as she rang him out and presented him with the card reader. Sirius couldn't take it anymore. It just burst out of him.
Oh my God, Kara, keep it in your pants.
Kara blanched, her face scrunched up and hurt as James stomped on his foot.
What is wrong with you?
He hissed.
Padfoot.
Remus shot him a look that instantly made Sirius's stomach hurt.
I'm sorry about that. He's a bit of a toddler. He throws a fit when he gets hangry. Maybe he should have ordered something.
I'm not hangry.
Sirius mumbled, though it wasn't loud enough for anyone but James to hear.
And she'd probably spit in it.
She should.
James muttered back darkly.
The fuck is going on?
Nothing.
Sirius denied. His eyes followed Remus as he walked to the end of the counter to wait for his drink, where he very purposely avoided Sirius's gaze.
Right.
James sighed.
It sure seems like nothing.
They stood in awkward silence for a few more moments before Sirius huffed.
Fine, I'll go apologize.
Good.
James said to his back as he stomped to the counter. Sirius hovered by the till until Kara was done scooping peanut butter into the blender when she finally came over with a frown.
What can I get you?
Sirius hated apologizing. He hated it even more when he'd done something completely arsehole-ish and deserved to feel like an absolute dickhead.
I'm sorry, Kara. I shouldn't have said that. It was out of line.
It was.
Kara agreed, crossing her arms.
Is that all?
Sirius bit his lip, still not looking at her.
Yeah, that's all.
Kara tutted.
Well, thanks, I guess. And piss off.
Sirius shuffled away to join his friends, who were both now waiting at the end of the smoothie bar. He hovered for a moment, wondering whether Remus would want to speak to him or not, before deciding he maybe owed him an apology too. He just opened his mouth to speak when Remus nudged their shoulders together.
Thanks for apologizing to her.
he murmured, catching Sirius's eye with a half smile.
Can I confess something, though?
What's that?
Sirius asked. Remus leaned closer, voice low so it was hidden below the whine of the blender.
I kind of hate it when they flirt with me.
A slow smile pulled itself across Sirius's lips. He loved being right. Part of him considered calling Kara over to take it back, but that seemed like a bridge too far.
Yeah.
Remus nodded, brown eyes shining.
Me too.
Sirius thought, then sighed as Remus settled into his one hip cocked position. He reached out and gave it a little pinch.
Bum in, Mooney.
Remus swatted his hand away, but stood up straight when he went to accept his smoothie. He shoved Sirius ahead of him as they split off from James.
Come on, you twat. Let's go home.
That mangy asshole.
Sirius muttered to himself, glaring across the room. Fucking Benji had Remus cornered by the cable machines, and Prongs was nowhere to be seen. Probably was in the toilets, like a chump. He bought a new brand of pre-workout that Sirius and Mooney may have made a little addition to that gave James an extra sense of urgency, and now Sirius was paying the price. Or Remus was. Remus was paying the price. Sirius rushed over to run interference. Remus hated it when they flirted with him. He got there just in time to hear Benji being a total creep.
Seen you around. You seem like someone who is really in touch with his body. I thought you might want to try my Pilates reformer class.
Sirius snorted to cover the immediate flare of burning rage in his gut.
He has Ehlers-Danlos. That's pretty much the opposite of being in touch with his body.
Remus arched a brow and gave him a questioning smirk. Sirius felt his cheeks heat. That maybe wasn't his information to share.
Oops, sorry, Moons.
Remus shot him a little wink, and Sirius flooded with relief. He was forgiven. God, he really needed to stop overstepping. Remus turned back to Benji with a shrug.
He's right, though.
EDS.
Benji clarified.
Pilates is actually great for that. It's all about core strength, working those tiny stabilizer muscles, mindfulness too, paying attention to how you feel, limiting the movement so you don't go too far. Honestly, it's kind of the perfect exercise, as long as you know not to push it. I teach the beginner class on Thursdays.
I don't.
Sirius started to decline the offer, but stopped when he saw the furrow between Remus's brows. He was considering it, really considering it, apparently. Finally, he nodded.
I'd like that, I think.
A bright smile lit up Benji's stupid, smug face.
I'm looking forward to it. See you Thursday.
Of course.
Sirius said, stepping between them with a sharp grimace that bared all his teeth. He placed a hand on Benji's shoulder and steered him away. They were done here.
We'll be there.
Chapter 4.
I'm going to Lily's for the night.
James announced to the entire flat. Sirius wasn't sure why he was being so bloody loud about it. He was standing right here, and Remus was in the lounge. James could literally see both of them from where he stood.
Okay, Slay.
Sirius said, going back to stirring his Merg Makani and taking his rice off the heat. Remus wandered into the kitchen and hovered over Sirius's shoulder. Remus hummed in agreement as he reached into the simmering pot to pluck out a chunk of chicken with his bare fingers. He popped it into his mouth, then huffed and puffed with wide eyes.
Zot?
Yeah, no shit, it's nearly boiling.
Sirius rolled his eyes.
Greedy git. You'll have some soon enough. Make yourself useful and warm up those naan, will you?
Remus wrapped the prepackaged flatbread in a damp paper towel and popped it in the microwave, then slouched against the corner to wait. Sirius frowned.
I'll be gone.
James clarified.
All night.
Have fun.
Sirius tried again. Prongs was being weird about this. Did he think he needed their permission to leave or something?
And I won't be back until after work tomorrow, since you're doing that Pilates class in the morning.
He reminded them.
We know.
Sirius grumbled. He was well aware he had to spend an hour with fucking Benji tomorrow. He didn't need James to bring it up. Between the hovering specter of Benji's stretchy joggers and Remus's insistence on destroying his joints, Sirius couldn't take it anymore. He sighed and pinched Remus's behind.
Bum in, Mooney.
Wanker.
Mooney muttered and swatted at his hand.
Go sit down before you hurt yourself. I'll bring your plate.
Sirius shooed him off to settle in front of the telly. Prongs was missing movie night, but that was his loss. Remus sauntered off as Sirius grabbed a couple bowls for their curry. James crossed his arms and glared a hole through Sirius's head.
You really need to stop doing that to him.
What, feeding him dinner?
Sirius asked absently as he dished up 2 portions of rice and spooned a heap of butter chicken over the top. James huffed.
No, Pinching his arse all the time. What's with that?
It's effective.
Sirius shrugged.
I don't want him to hurt himself.
Right.
James said skeptically, his mouth a thin line.
My methods are flawless, mate. He's fine with it.
Sirius dismissed.
You sure about that?
James asked.
You've talked about it.
They didn't need to talk about it. Sirius knew when he was pushing Mooney too far, and this wasn't even close. This was friendly badgering at most.
Bugger off, Prongs.
James grunted and held out a hand to carry Mooney's dish to the living room. He handed it off, then watched as Sirius gave Mooney his to hold too until he wriggled under the blanket. Once Sirius and Remus were settled in side by side, bowls in their laps and plate of naan propped on Sirius's knees, James fixed them with a stern look.
So, I'll be out of the flat for the rest of the night.
We get it, Prongs. You're getting laid. Good on you.
Sirius barked. What was his problem?
And you'll have the flat to yourselves.
He fixed Mooney in particular with a meaningful look. The muscle in Mooney's cheek twitched.
We got it the first 6 times, James, thank you. We'll be fine. Enjoy your girlfriend.
Right. Fine.
James nodded and stomped off to the door. Sirius thought he heard him muttering along the way, though it wasn't loud enough for him to hear what had possibly put a bug in his arse.
What was his problem?
Sirius wondered. He flinched a little as the door slammed.
Who knows?
Remus asked, cheeks pink. Sirius didn't think the food was too spicy, but maybe he'd misjudged it. It wouldn't be the first time. Sirius shrugged.
Whatever. What are we watching, Moons?
Life, finds a way.
Remus quoted as he pushed play.
Dinosaur-based violence, excellent.
Sirius mumbled around a mouthful of curry. They ate in comfortable silence, but Sirius was having a hard time concentrating on the film. Remus was just so damn wiggly. He kept shifting in his weight and adjusting his limbs. Legs out, legs curled under, leaning on one elbow then the other, one knee bent with his chin resting on it while the other poked Sirius in the thigh. Finally, the third time he brought his legs into pretzel beneath him, Sirius caught him wincing.
What's wrong?
He asked, pouncing on the expression. Remus slowly drew his hand away from where it was rubbing at his hip, as though Sirius were a T-Rex who was drawn to movement.
Nothing.
Liar.
Sirius accused.
Why are you doing that? What hurts?
Remus snorted.
Everything hurts at least a little all the time. That's how the gym works, Sirius.
Piss off. We both know that's not what that is.
Sirius scoffed.
Why were you rubbing your hip?
It slipped out a little bit this morning, just for a minute.
He clarified, cutting Sirius off before he could get into a proper tizzy about it.
It went right back in. It wasn't a big deal.
What?
Sirius cried.
You should have called me.
Why on earth would I have called you?
Remus asked.
I am your emergency contact.
Sirius explained. Really, he was being rather dense about this.
That means I am the person you contact in an emergency.
Remus rolled his eyes.
I wasn't in hospital, so your status as emergency contact wasn't relevant.
I'm pretty sure hips falling out of their sockets are inherently emergencies. Moons.
Sirius scolded.
You daft thing. You should have called me.
You have that big presentation for the client, who only knows what they don't want coming up. I didn't want to distract you.
Remus said, flushing a little and unwilling to meet Sirius's eyes.
You're busy.
Sirius frowned and nudged him gently with his shoulder.
I'm never too busy for you. You know that.
A soft smile pulled across Remus's face, eyes flicking to meet Sirius's for just a moment before training themselves firmly on his own lap.
I'll keep that in mind next time.
You better. Now budge up. On your stomach. You're getting a massage.
Sirius instructed. Remus huffed and shook his head, though he was already maneuvering his frankly irresponsible amount of limbs over the sofa. Sirius perched on the edge next to his thighs and watched Remus's face as he rubbed slow circles around the joint. He'd never admit when it hurt because he was a stubborn twat, so Sirius had long ago learned how to spot the little flinch that meant a muscle was sore and needed attention.
You know,
Sirius said hesitantly, like he was just now considering it for the first time instead of mentally tracking it for months.
It does feel like we haven't had to do this as much lately. Do you think...
What, you torturing me?
Remus grunted as Sirius dug his thumb, carefully, gently, into a muscle that made his shoulders tense.
No, you numpty.
Sirius reached up to flick his earlobe.
Your joints just falling out of their sockets. It does seem like James's training has helped, doesn't it? Unless you've been hiding this from me a lot more than you used to.
Remus shook his head.
No, you're right. It's working.
He craned his neck to give Sirius a stern look.
Don't tell him. He'll be insufferable about it.
Sirius mimed zipping his lips shut and throwing away the key.
Wouldn't dream of it.
Good man.
Remus murmured. Sirius bit his lip against a stupid grin. He loved it when Mooney talked like somebody's granddad. It suited him, with his rickety body and love of knitwear. Sirius worked slowly, moving from the jut of Remus's hip bone to the muscles further out, across his low back and upper glutes, kneading and circling in each tender spot until his shoulders relaxed down from his ears and a content little sigh escaped his throat. Sirius was pretty sure he didn't even know he was making those sounds, but Sirius lived for it. He liked knowing he was doing everything he could to help his friend feel better, and Remus so rarely admitted to wanting help. This was something Sirius could do for him that he struggled to do for himself, and that was really all he wanted, the chance to make Remus's life easier. Sirius frowned.
Is your neck bothering you too?
Remus must have adjusted his head 6 times in the last few minutes, stretching his neck this way and that as he scrunched his eyes.
I've been working out, Pants. Everything is bothering me.
Remus complained.
If it's a muscle and it's in my body, it's a little sore. I've asked Prongs if it's supposed to be like that, and apparently, since it's just a low ache and nothing sharp or intolerable, yes, I can expect to hurt just a little, forever. Bastard even laughed when he said it.
Does he realize you have an insane pain tolerance, though?
If Mooney was hurting, he shouldn't be doing those things, or so Sirius assumed. He didn't know that for sure.
You didn't think your hip being out of its socket warranted a phone call. Your pain scale is a little different from other people's.
Remus wrinkled his nose.
I did point that out, yes. He told me to stop whinging. We both know I can tell the difference between sore and injured.
He put on a high voice that sounded nothing like James in quality but perfectly mimicked him in attitude.
You've been well fucked, Mooney. You know what good hurt feels like? The cunt.
Sirius barked a disbelieving laugh.
Well, was he right?
Yes. God, I hate him sometimes.
Remus muttered.
Do my neck.
So needy.
Sirius teased, already reaching for Remus's nape. Remus flailed a half-hearted swat at him and mumbled something that might have been piss off into the cushions. Poor Mooney. No wonder he was constantly sore. His neck was basically one long knot from the base of his skull to the top of his shoulders and probably beyond. Sirius dug his thumb and forefinger in slow, soothing circles, trying to work it out without pressing so hard his delicate skin bruised. When he got to his upper back, it was even worse.
Christ moons, how do you live like this?
Sirius asked, shifting so he could use both hands to work out the tension in Remus's muscles.
Irritably.
Remus grumbled around a hum that was somewhere between pained and content. Sirius chose to interpret it as, hurt so good. That wasn't how Sirius saw him at all, though he could recognize that was the act Remus put on for them. It wasn't real, though. Sirius saw through his snarky jokes and general reticence. He was kind, and he worked hard to make people feel seen and appreciated. If anything, Sirius was the irritable one. Sirius was the difficult one. Nobody ever scolded Mooney for snapping at some poor customer service worker. That was all Sirius's role. He was territorial about his friends and hesitant with strangers. It had taken him 6 months to warm up to Lily, and he had to be acclimated to her presence in their group, like a formerly feral rescue cat whose owners brought home a new kitten. He was annoyed she was stealing James's time away from Sirius for ages before he stopped seeing her as a threat. Maybe James thought he was regressing, and that's why he'd been so weird about being gone all night. That would be silly. Sirius and Lily got on like a house on fire now. They had their own separate text thread that mostly consisted of F1 racing memes, an ongoing discussion of the most shaggable cryptids, and idle bitching about fussy siblings. He hoped that wasn't why James was acting like such a prat earlier. Maybe Sirius needed to clean up his act a bit, though. He'd been short with people at work, and poor Kara had taken the brunt of his temper that one day at the gym, though Sirius struggled to regret that. She was making Mooney uncomfortable. He was acting like rather a wet blanket recently. He must have been letting out a bit of his guilt on Remus's back, because Mooney yelped as his thumb gouged at a particularly tender spot.
Shit, Pats.
He groaned.
Did you put your entire weight into that one spot? Or...
Oh, sorry.
Sirius apologized, stopping his spiraling thoughts and his hands in unison.
Do you want me to stop?
Remus hesitated, which Sirius assumed meant he'd like him to continue, but was feeling selfish for admitting it, so Sirius went on.
Because I don't mind. Just tell me if you'd like me to quit.
Remus grabbed the permission with both hands.
No, please keep going. Just
He paused.
not quite so hard.
I can do that,
Sirius smiled.
though it might be easier if I…
Sirius moved to straddle Remus's hips so he could use his body weight instead of his muscles.
What are you? You know what? Yeah, that's fine.
Remus cut off his own protest.
Do whatever you'd like.
I always do.
Sirius grinned, then got to work. He pressed his palms across Remus's shoulders and around his blades, kneading at any spot that seemed to make him wince or draw away. He smoothed long strokes along the edges of his spine and across the broad expanse of his lower back. He made sure not to settle his full weight on Remus's bum, afraid of pushing something out of place by accident. He worried that maybe even the well-worn softness of Remus's cotton t-shirt would give his sensitive skin rug burn, should he ask him to take it off. But would Sirius's bare hands offer any less friction? Would it be weird if he went to get some lotion or something to ease the movement? His mind flashed for a bizarre moment to the covert bottle of lube in their shower, which seemed to be depleting itself at a steady pace, and then to the brilliant pink in Remus's cheeks when he thanked Sirius for the full-sized bottle of the actual shampoo. Sirius was pretty sure Mooney would combust in embarrassment if he went and got his secret stash. No, it was better just to leave it. He'd speak up if something was bothering him. Though it didn't seem to be bothering him at the moment. Based on the sounds he was making, Sirius wasn't hurting him at all. In fact, he seemed to be quite enjoying himself. And Sirius. Sirius did not think this through. It had been a minute since he'd brought someone home, and now there was an objectively attractive man between his thighs, sighing and humming and groaning, and Sirius's body was responding. He couldn't help it. It was Pavlovian. He might die of shame if Remus found out he was hard, though. Still, Sirius wasn't going to stop. Mooney was hurting, even if he wouldn't admit it, and Sirius was able to help. He could figure this out. What followed were 20 of the most grueling minutes of Sirius's life. He knelt taller and kept his hips lifted as Remus squirmed and made all sorts of obscene, pleasured sounds below him, until finally every place Sirius touched made Mooney sink further into his relaxed, sofa puddle state. Then he clambered off, sneakily adjusted himself in his, oh God, so soaked, pants, and started kneading Remus's arse. He had planned to skip it altogether, but one of Sirius's knees had pressed into it when he was trying to angle his obnoxious fucking knob away from Remus's lower back, and he'd about hit the roof. That was probably where he was having the most pain, what with his hip slipping out earlier, and Remus wasn't going to suffer just because Sirius hadn't pulled in months. He knelt by the edge of the sofa and really leaned his weight into it, feeling his face flush crimson when Remus moaned.
Fuck, that feels good.
It was worth it, though, for the way Remus smiled up at him, Sirius hiding everything below his waist behind the base of the couch as the film ended.
Thanks, Pant. That really helped.
Don't mention it.
Sirius tried to wave his thanks away, though his voice went weird and high and completely belied his false casualness.
I'm tired, I'm going to bed.
All right.
Remus said, watching him quizzically as he disappeared behind his bedroom door.
Good night.
Night, Mooney.
Sirius called over his shoulder. He shut the door behind himself with a hurried snap, then collapsed on the bed before kicking out of his trousers and pants and pulling himself off fast and furious. As he lay on his sheets afterwards, sticky and panting, he tried to shake his head clear. Fuck, that was weird. Sirius apparently desperately needed to get laid. Chapter 5. Fucking Benji. God, Sirius loathed him. Benji with his soft-looking pants and his lean muscles, leaning over Mooney to show him how to use the machines. No, the reformers. Springs as support instead of resistance.
It's really important to focus on control. That's the main thing I want from you today.
Benji ordered. Sirius tried not to scoff, as though that wasn't the primary thing James and Remus had been practicing. Benji was retreading old ground here.
Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on you.
Benji said with a wink and a leer. So unprofessional. Why were people always creeps at the gym? The phenomenon needed to be studied.
Thanks.
Remus bit his lip, casting a nervous eye around the studio. Benji had set Remus up immediately in front of his machine, ostensibly so he could adjust his form and keep him safe, but anybody with a functioning brain could see he just wanted to spend an hour ogling Mooney. But Benji didn't know Remus at all, so he couldn't tell how uncomfortable and exposed Remus felt in a front and center position like that. He would have been much happier in the back, trying his best to blend into the walls as he figured things out. At least he was wearing his compression tights under his athletic shorts. Mooney would die of embarrassment if he accidentally flashed his entire kit and caboodle to the other students while stretching his ridiculously long legs. Sirius settled himself on the reformer next to Remus's with a huff. Remus wanted to talk to Benji and put his mind at ease about what he was in for, so they'd come early. Sirius was going to wind up spending an extra 15 minutes with this utter bellend. He hoped Remus hated Pilates. He never wanted to do this again.
Can I help you with anything? It's your first time too, isn't it?
Benji asked Sirius, barely managing to tear his eyes away from Remus to look at the person he was actually addressing.
I've got it.
Sirius grunted as he hooked 3 springs onto the pegs. Bodyweight exercise wasn't rocket science. Benji raised a brow and set his mouth in a flat line.
Suit yourself.
I will.
Sirius muttered under his breath and earned himself a stern look from Mooney.
What? Don't act like a Burke.
Remus scolded.
I'm not.
Yes, he was. Remus sighed and rolled his eyes, though he gave Sirius a fond smile afterwards. The room quickly filled around them. The rows of equipment claimed in 2s and 3s until everyone was taken by a woman with tight abs that peaked between high-waisted leggings and a long-line sports bra. Apparently, Benji's classes were very popular among the Yummy Mummy set. Benji clapped his hands and took his place in the front of the room, his toned shoulders reflected in the giant mirror behind him.
All right, everyone, welcome to our Rise and Grind session of Reformer Pilates.
He looked around the room.
As you all know, this is a beginner class, so we're going to focus on the basics. However, that doesn't mean it will be easy, so make sure you're listening to your body and not pushing yourself past the point of comfort.
Benji rambled on for what seemed like forever, as Sirius wondered what percentage of his classes he wasted with his infernal yapping. Probably too much, if today was any indicator. Maybe his students were willing to cut him some slack since he comped the first session. That surprised Sirius. Usually the group classes added an extra charge to their monthly membership, but Benji had told them, well, Remus, really, not to worry about it. Sirius tuned back in just in time to hear him say,
Let's get started, shall we?
Finally, he was done running his mouth. Sirius didn't understand why he needed to talk so long. How difficult could it be? Quite difficult, as it turned out. What followed were 40 of the most grueling, no, harrowing, minutes of Sirius's life. He'd been going to the gym regularly for months now. How could he possibly still be this out of shape? His legs refused to flex that way, for one thing. How was it possible Sirius couldn't straighten them when Benji told him to put them in the air? They were straight all blasted day when he walked around on them, but for some reason when he was lying on his back, his knees insisted on staying bent. For another, Sirius's body was rather heavier than he realized. He refused to decrease the number of resistance springs because Sirius lifted real weights, and that, as it turned out, was a poor decision. Every muscle from his shoulder blades to his thighs burned, but Sirius refused to admit defeat, so he soldiered on without complaint. Or without much complaint, at least.
Fuck.
He grunted as he pulsed in and out of a lunge. He wasn't sure how he was supposed to keep his balance when his thighs were this tired and the bloody machine was moving under his foot. Sirius's knees wouldn't stop trembling, and he kept having to grab the bar to stop himself from tipping over. He glanced over at Remus, who seemed to be faring only marginally better. He was cursing less, at least.
How you doing, Moons? Got your...
Keep that core tight, Remus, and your hips facing forward.
Benji instructed as he walked by.
And I want you on light springs for this one because, actually, do you mind if I touch you?
That. Benji kept doing that too, and it was pissing Sirius off. He'd swan by when Sirius was checking on Mooney, then monopolize his attention and put his hands all over him. It was creepy, and he was neglecting the rest of his full classroom. The whole thing was irresponsible and infantilizing, and of course Remus was too nice to call him on it. He always saw the best in people, so obviously he'd give pervy Benji the benefit of the doubt. Sirius wondered how Benji would like it if Sirius touched his teeth with his knuckles. Remus shook his head, eyes barely flicking to Benji before focusing back on his own reflection in the wall-sized mirror.
The resistance on lunges doesn't increase or decrease the amount of work, just where you feel it. See how hard Black is working to push back his carriage.
That fucker. Of course, Sirius would just so happen to wobble when Benji called Mooney's attention to him.
That's working his back quad, right here.
He smoothed a hand from the jut of Remus's left hip down to his knee. Ugh.
If the carriage moves more easily, you're working on your front, stabilizing leg instead, and that's our goal for you, stability. You should feel that activation right about here.
Benji waited until Remus reached the bottom of his lunge, then had the gall to cup his right arse cheek as he reversed the movement. Sirius clenched his fists and gnashed his teeth, openly groping his students in public. Disgusting. He was lucky Sirius hadn't hit him.
Does that make sense? Feel good?
Yeah, I get it.
Remus nodded, though his expression didn't imply he thought much of anything felt good at the moment. The smile Benji flashed at Mooney sparkled.
Great. Just remember to keep that pelvis tucked and you're golden. You've got excellent form overall.
Sirius huffed something that might have, coincidentally, sounded a bit like piss off, which drew Benji's attention.
You okay, Black?
I'm dandy.
Sirius snarled. Benji hummed and turned away, condescending prick.
Now lie flat on your carriage and put your feet through the straps. It's time for leg circles.
Benji announced. Sirius didn't like the smug smirk on his face or the evil glint in his eye. Was that sulfur he smelled? Maybe Benji was an actual fucking demon. This class certainly felt like the seventh circle of hell. Sirius did as he was told and slipped his feet through the straps, then copied the motions of the woman next to him. He completely ignored when Benji said small, more controlled circles were better than large, sloppy ones, until he found out lifting his lower back to make the big circles actually made things easier. Then, Sirius pasted himself to the cushion like he was superglued there, and his legs were shaking in a matter of seconds. He glanced over to see Remus with a wrinkled brow and pained face.
What's up, Mooney? Why the face?
Nothing.
Remus answered tightly, his face bright red and knuckles white on the edge of his reformer. Sirius frowned.
Are you sure? You look a little uncomfortable. You could always.
Remus glanced around to make sure Benji was far away and all the other students were just as miserably occupied as they were, then hissed.
I'm just trying to make sure I don't come.
Sirius's head snapped to the left so quickly his neck cracked. One strap slipped off his foot and flew up to hit him in the face.
What?
It's all deep core work, Sirius. You know what happened that one time?
Remus explained, as though that wasn't the whole reason Sirius was here. The idea of it happening again, of Remus coming in his pants here and now, in front of all these people, filled Sirius with a hot, snarling flash of protective jealousy. None of them deserved to see Remus Lupin orgasm, and Sirius would fight fucking Benji to the death before he'd let that man make his Mooney come. And oh, Sirius had been rather stupid, hadn't he? None of this had been about wanting to achieve a core-gasm at all, had it? This wasn't a scientific endeavor to see what it felt like to jizz himself whilst flaccid. It was actually quite strange that he'd been putting in this much effort to do so. What kind of unhinged weirdo wanted to come in his pants at the gym? Of course, Sirius didn't want that. He, apparently, just wanted to watch Mooney come. Preferably in private, using some part of Sirius's body to make him feel good. Not here, where others could see him and he'd be mortified. Sirius's stomach squirmed at the thought. How uncomfortable had he accidentally been making Mooney feel by focusing on him like that? Sirius owed him an apology, or at the very least, a supportive gesture. He looped his foot back into his strap, resumed his workout. How the fuck were they still doing leg circles? The Pilates people really weren't joking about the stability thing, if they could be so unaffected by the entire world shifting on its axis, and gratefully flipped on his side when they moved on to the next exercise. Sirius faced Remus and his beautiful, precious face and his sweaty, magnificent curls as they moved their top legs back and forth.
Hey,
he whispered, stomach flip-flopping when Remus met his eye. How had he missed this for so long? Because this feeling wasn't new to Sirius, he was quickly realizing. He'd always wanted to bathe, no, drown, in the warm pool of Remus's attention. He just thought that's what friendship felt like. He'd thought his relationship with James was the one that was different, closer to a brother, a twin separated at birth than a typical friend. But no, the outlier had been Remus all along, hadn't it? This wasn't friendship. This was something else entirely.
What?
Remus whispered back, prodding Sirius through his uncharacteristic silence.
You know I'd cover for you if that happened, right?
Sirius asked.
If I'd cover for you.
Remus huffed a little laugh and rolled his eyes.
And how would you do that?
I don't know. Give you my shorts.
Sirius suggested.
You'd be arrested. You can't just take off your clothes in public, Padfoot.
Remus teased, a smile tugging at the corner of his lovely lips.
Right, okay, you have a point.
Sirius agreed.
Create a distraction then. Pretend to get hurt. Start a fight. Something so you'd have time to sneak away before anybody saw.
Remus was beaming now, eyes bright and face aglow with amusement. An embarrassing, familiar sense of pride welled up in Sirius at being the one who made Mooney smile. God, he really was gone, wasn't he?
It's very sweet that you'd punch someone to give me an out. Thank you.
Remus chuckled.
Though I think I'll just back off before it becomes an issue. Yeah.
Sirius had been looking for an excuse to fight Benji, actually, but he did like this gym and didn't want to get banned.
That's probably for the best.
The rest of the class sped by, Sirius soaring above it on the high of realizing he had feelings for his best friend. Big feelings. Romantic feelings. Big, romantic feelings. Feelings that were ambiguous and without a boundary, so Sirius wasn't going to name them, because that would be insane. It was impossible to be in love with someone before the first date, right? Right. It all came crashing down around him at the end of class. Sirius had just floated through, wiping down his machine, and gallantly tried to get Mooney to let him clean his too, though he'd been thoroughly rebuffed, and was waiting patiently for Remus to get his shoes on when Benji called out.
Remus, would you mind staying for a few minutes?
Sirius's stomach dropped to his ankles so fast it felt like a lift cable snapping.
Oh no, oh god, no.
He turned to Remus with wide, panicked eyes.
Mooney, say no, please say no.
Remus tilted his head, looking for all the world like a bemused puppy.
What?
When he asks you out,
Sirius rushed out.
please tell him no.
He's not going to ask me out.
Remus scoffed.
I'm sure he just wants to make sure I didn't hurt myself and tell me how to do better next time.
Benji didn't just want to talk to Remus about his technique. Sirius knew it, more certainly than he'd ever known anything in his life. He could feel it burning deep in his gut. And yes, that could have been muscle fatigue from the obscenely intense core workout he'd just done. But it wasn't. It was a smoldering tangle of possessive jealousy and pent-up desire that threatened to flare at the slightest poke. But Sirius had made enough of a prat of himself recently, and Remus didn't owe him anything. If Remus wanted to go out with Benji, Sirius needed to stay out of his way. Even if the very idea made him want to throw himself off a building. Sirius took a deep breath and shoved down his panic.
Okay, but if I'm right.
He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. How to explain that the most important thing in the world was Remus's happiness. And Sirius hoped that happiness would be together, as Mooney and Padfoot, forever. But if Remus wanted someone else, if Remus wanted fucking Benji, Sirius would swallow that bitter pill without complaint.
I'll never stop you from doing what you want, Moons. You know that. If you want him, that's fine. But if you're not sure.
Sirius swallowed around the lump in his throat, trying to keep his voice steady, even if all he wanted was to get on his knees and beg.
If you're not sure, Mooney, please tell him no.
With that, Sirius tore himself away, leaving Remus to gape after his retreating back. Chapter 6. Sirius stared, unseeing, at the floor between his scuffed trainers. He didn't know how long he'd been hunched over on the bench in the locker room, forearms resting on his splayed knees, hands clasped so tightly his fingers ached. But he was certain it was longer than it would have taken Remus to tell Benji to fuck off. Oh, he'd been such an unbelievable numpty. Not just for carrying on for how many years, because it had definitely been years, he realized as he sifted through his memories with this life-altering filter, blissfully unaware he was in love with his best friend. No, that had been bad enough. But then he had to go and blurt it out like a lovesick fool, begging Remus to pass up an opportunity with a hot Pilates instructor with no backup plan for what would happen if Mooney didn't want him back. Whatever Benji had to say was evidently enough to keep Remus away for a small eternity, which left Sirius to stew in his own anxiety and embarrassment. Remus wouldn't dilly-dally so much if he felt the same way, would he? He wouldn't give Sirius a chance to spiral like this. He'd be hot on his heels to confess his similarly undying love and maybe snog a little before work. Which meant he must be saying yes to Benji, must be getting his number and planning their first date, maybe being so bold as to steal a cheeky kiss right there in the studio. And the locker room door swung open and Remus stormed in, sending Sirius's stomach into some sort of trapeze routine, soaring, tumbling, twisting this way and that as he tried to read a face he thought he knew as well as his own, but was, for some reason, completely inscrutable at the moment. Mooney's eyes scanned the benches and landed on Sirius, a small frown flitting across his features before he took a deep breath and started across the room.
Panfoot.
Mooney said softly, so gentle it made Sirius ache. He'd always been like that, the only one of their friends who knew how to move through life with caution and care. So unlike Sirius's chaotic whirlwind tendencies or James, who barreled through life like a human wrecking ball, Remus knew how to be quiet. He could be patient and still. He was better at listening and observing. He didn't just say the first thing that came to mind. At least he'd be kind enough to let Sirius down easy.
Panfoot.
Remus tried again, an uncertain hand flickering into Sirius's peripheral vision in an aborted motion of comfort. He towered over Sirius, his lanky limbs giving him an unreasonable height advantage as he looked down on Sirius's rounded shoulders, but his voice was small.
Sirius, can we talk, please?
Sirius swallowed around the lump in his throat, not that it helped anything. The words still came out choked and raw.
Yeah, of course. What about moons?
Remus tutted, a sound that wanted to be frustrated but knew it needed to be tender.
Somewhere a little more private, maybe.
Remus cut himself off with a huff and grabbed both of their shower kits.
Follow me, yeah.
Of course, always anywhere. But that would be a completely mental thing to say, so Sirius just nodded. Remus's lips twitched up in the corners in a fond, if tense, half-smile.
And put on your sandals. We share a shower at home. I'm not getting athlete's foot because of your terrible locker room hygiene.
Sirius did as he was bid, though he felt a bit silly in his squelch-slapping flip-flops as he followed in Remus's equally thwoppy wake. Mooney poked his head in one bank of shower cubicles and then another before settling on the set with more steam rolling over the doors. He pulled Sirius into a stall, tossed their towels over the door, and turned on the water.
I thought you said you wanted privacy.
Sirius asked. Remus was being exceedingly confusing today. Or maybe it was just that Sirius was excessively confused. His brain was too muddled for a clear cause and effect analysis at the moment.
Bloody echoey no matter what, innit? Might as well use the noise to our advantage.
Remus shrugged.
And they might clear out sooner, if they're already half finished. What do you want me to say, Panfoot? I'm a bit agitated at the moment. My reasoning might not be the most sound.
Ouch. Sirius didn't mean to upset Remus. Of course he didn't. Still, a little tact would have been considerate. At the very least, Remus could let him lick his wounds in the privacy of his own cubicle.
Well, if you're so bothered by my presence, I can leave you to it,
Sirius said, reaching for the door. Remus's hand shot out and wrapped around his wrist.
Padfoot, wait, no, that's not what I meant. I'm sorry.
His voice was tentative, and his eyes wide, that kicked puppy-last biscuit look that always made Sirius fold in an instant.
I'm just a little confused. I feel like I missed something important, and I'm trying to catch up.
Sirius hesitated. What if Mooney wanted Benji and not him? Would Sirius be able to deal with that? Would Remus be able to deal with that? How awkward would it be for them to stay friends after that kind of confession? They lived together, for fuck's sake. What if Sirius made Mooney uncomfortable and he decided to move out? What if things between Mooney and Benji got serious, and Remus's boyfriend didn't want him hanging out with the flatmate who was secretly in love with him? All of that could be avoided if Sirius kept his big mouth shut. He chewed his lower lip, focusing on the tile over Remus's left shoulder as he weighed his options. He couldn't look in those big, brown, impossibly kind eyes to see the pity that went hand in hand with rejection.
Padfoot,
Remus murmured, voice so low, Sirius barely heard him over the echoing spatter of the shower against the hard tile floor. He was close enough Sirius could smell his sweat and feel the heat radiating off his body, and Sirius couldn't stop himself from meeting Remus's questioning gaze.
Why don't you want me to go out with Benji?
Sirius tried. He really did try. He desperately wanted to hold himself back, to protect them both from the bomb that was certain to implode their friendship. He couldn't manage it. The truth spilled out of him of its own accord, falling between them so heavily, Sirius swore he heard the words thud against the floor.
Because I want you to be with me.
Mooney's eyes fluttered for the longest half-second of Sirius's life, and then,
oh, thank fuck.
That hadn't been what Sirius was expecting. His brain stumbled as he tried to switch gears, like when he was preparing to leave a voicemail, and the person picked up on the fifth ring.
What?
I hoped I'd been hoping, but you never said, and?
The rest of Remus's sentence was lost to the back of Sirius's throat as he surged forward and kissed him hard. Mooney let out a muffled grunt of surprise, then sighed and relaxed into it, his pliant body leaning into Sirius's. Kissing Mooney turned out to be everything. The most important thing Sirius had done in his whole life. His plump, soft lips moving against Sirius's, his smooth, velvety skin stretching beneath Sirius's frantic palms as he rucked up his shirt, the sharp sting of his teeth when they dug into Sirius's lower lip and tugged. It felt like magic, like the whole universe had split itself open the second their mouths met, and Sirius couldn't get enough. All he wanted was more time, more taste, more friction as their bodies found each other. Sirius's hands moved to Remus's hips and guided him back against the wall, chasing the more he so desperately craved. He barely registered the sound of their steps squelching on the wet floor until Remus started to laugh.
What's so funny?
He asked, barely managing to pull himself away from Remus's mouth to allow an answer. He busied himself tasting the column of his neck as giddy giggles spilled from Remus's throat.
This should be the least sexy thing,
he explained, tugging at Sirius's sweaty top and tapping his sandal-clad feet.
and yet.
Sirius pressed a smile into Remus's shoulder.
And yet,
he agreed, then relieved Remus of his shirt. Remus did the same, stripping Sirius's over his head and flinging it onto the sodden pile in the corner. Sirius kissed him again, both of them gasping as he pinned Remus to the wall with his hips.
Shit, pads.
Remus hissed, untying Sirius's shorts and reaching inside to grasp his cock.
Oh my god.
Sirius moaned, mouthing across Remus's collarbone.
Fuck, that feels good.
Sirius rolled his pelvis into Remus's grip and fumbled with his own wet, sticky shorts, shoving them down and kicking them away. Remus huffed another laugh into his mouth, and it was the sweetest thing Sirius ever tasted. Sirius let himself be pulled in closer, drawn in by Remus's smell and his taste and the long leg that wrapped around his waist, until he was rutting mindlessly against Remus's hard cock through his clothes. He fought the shorts as far down as they'd go with Remus's thigh still propped against his hip, but grunted in frustration when there was still another layer of fabric between their skin.
Fucking bloody hell off, goddammit.
He cursed as he tried to peel Remus out of his stupid, sexy lycra tights.
Stop trying to climb me, you heathen.
Never.
Remus chuckled, but he did as he was told, standing on his own 2 feet until Sirius could free him from his soaked clothes. As soon as the fabric was shoved off to the side, his long leg was back at Sirius's waist. Sirius had no complaints as his hands roamed over pale velvet thighs. Mooney whimpered, hands scrabbling to pull Sirius even closer and deepen their kiss. He squirmed against Sirius, skin covered in sweat and water, raising and lowering himself on his toes, seeking, always seeking. More, he seemed to be saying. More, closer. I need more. Sirius had never wanted to provide something so badly in his life. He slid his hands over Remus's hips, across the expanse of his back, and over his arse to grip his thighs. With one great heave and a little hop from Mooney, he was in Sirius's arms, braced against the wall with his legs locked behind Sirius's back. One sandal brushed against Sirius's arse as it dangled precariously from Remus's big toe.
You're so fucking hot.
Mooney mumbled into Sirius's mouth, circling his hips to find friction against his stomach.
I need you to fuck me.
The thought made Sirius's hips jerk so hard his feet nearly slipped out from under him.
Christ.
He panted.
Fuck, yeah, okay.
Remus gave him a heated look, then dove back into the kiss. Teeth scraped lips, gasps escaped heaving chests to dance across searching tongues, and Mooney groped blindly in his shower bag with mounting frustration.
God damn it.
He hissed, finally breaking away from Sirius to look through his things. Sirius seized the opportunity to dip his tongue into the hollow of his collarbone and taste his steam-dampened skin. The victorious hum of discovery vibrated through Sirius's cheek when Remus finally came up with his prize. He zipped the waterproof bag shut and tossed it back on the shower shelf, then waggled a travel-sized bottle of lube.
Got it.
Sirius huffed a laugh.
Why do you even have that?
Remus gave him a baffled look.
Do you really think I'm someone who unpacks his toiletry bag? It's always in there.
Before Sirius had time to process the fact that Mooney had been walking around with lube for who knew how long, ready to be fucked at any moment, Remus had flipped open the cap, spread a generous amount across his fingers, and reached around Sirius's straining forearms to start working himself open with quick flicks of his wrist. It was agony, trying to decide whether he needed to see more than he needed to taste. So Sirius settled on rapidly alternating between pecks on the lips, watching the pleasure painted across Mooney's face, and glimpses of his hand as it flickered in and out of sight. This was for Sirius. The bow in Remus's neck, his head thrown back in ecstasy, the muffled whimpers as he wriggled in Sirius's arms, the salt on his skin. All of that was for Sirius to see, to hear, to taste, to feel, because Mooney was preparing himself for him, because he wanted to be filled and taken by Sirius and no one else. It made Sirius feel half feral, the way he wanted to stake his claim, to line Mooney's delicate skin with the imprints of his lips so there could be no mistaking it. Remus had chosen Sirius. He was offering himself up, quite literally putting himself in Sirius's hands and trusting that he'd never let him fall. And Sirius would do anything to keep that trust, would throw himself off any cliff just to make sure it was safe for Remus to follow.
You're going to kill me.
Sirius groaned, sucking gently at the pulse thrumming in Remus's neck, Mooney's dick grinding against Sirius's stomach as he bounced and writhed on his own fingers. The teasing brush of Remus's hand against his cockhead with every thrust of his fingers was driving Sirius mad with need, desperate to taste and feel every bit of the man in his arms. Sirius leaned in closer and kissed him hard, ready to line himself up and press inside the second Mooney, so much as thought the word please. Then a pop sounded from somewhere under Remus's bum, a sudden jerk jolted through his hip and down his leg, and a sharp inhale spasmed through his lungs. They both froze except for the rapid heaving of their chests, eyes locked with twin expressions of fear.
Sirius, don't.
Remus begged as he tightened his legs around Sirius's waist and clamped a hand on his shoulder.
Not here.
Sirius murmured, then kissed him softly to temper the sting.
Your hip was out yesterday.
He eased Remus's feet to the floor and ran his hands up his soft thighs to knead at his sore hip.
No.
Remus whined, trying to reel him back in with one of those long legs. It almost worked when he started rolling his hips into Sirius's hard cock again, the tricky minx, but Sirius forced himself to take a big step back. He shook his head.
I refuse to hurt you, Moons. We can wait until we get home. We've survived this long.
Sirius actually wasn't sure how he had lived through a decade of friendship without burying himself inside Remus Lupin, and he was almost certainly going to suffer through an 8-hour semi now that he knew he wanted to, but needs must. Remus apparently disagreed. He rushed forward and crowded Sirius back against the opposite wall.
Sometimes it's really annoying when you're all noble and thoughtful.
He growled with a nip to Sirius's earlobe and another to the pulse point under his jaw.
Turn around.
The warm breath against his neck and rough tone in Remus's voice sent shivers down Sirius's spine. He turned to face the cold tile, braced a forearm against the wall, and popped out his arse. He wasn't picky. He was just as happy to offer himself to Remus as he had been to fill him. This was a more than acceptable compromise. A dark chuckle vibrated through Sirius's back as Remus wrapped his arms around him. The bridge of his nose lightly grazed Sirius's neck in the barest hint of a nuzzle. It was closer to being scented than a sign of affection, and Sirius suddenly felt like foolishly eager prey that had been caught in a trap.
Aren't we the optimist?
Mooney hummed, dancing along the line between teasing and mocking.
We're not doing that here, remember. Legs together, sweetheart.
What the fuck? Where had Remus been hiding this domineering seductor? He was suddenly some kind of authoritative sex director, CEO, Chief Ejaculation Officer. Sirius's body thrummed with anticipation as he shuffled his feet close enough for his flip-flops to touch. What was Mooney planning? What did he want, if he wasn't going to fuck Sirius? Would he reach around Sirius's body and pull him off like that, just the way Sirius would do to himself? Was he going to give Sirius a taste of his own medicine and finger him until he was right at the edge, only to leave him there, achingly hard and dripping? Maybe he wanted to tease Sirius, to get himself off where Sirius could very well touch him, but he wouldn't even let him watch. Sirius would just have to listen to the obscene sound of Remus's hand on his own cock, knowing it wasn't for him to see or taste or touch, waiting in frustrated agony until he felt the hot spatter of cum across his arse and back. Sirius's eager erection kicked at the very thought. The tiny bottle of lube clicked open and shut behind him, and then long, slick fingers traced the insides of his thighs and pressed across his taint. Oh, that was new. Sirius hadn't ever done that before. He quickly crossed his legs at the ankles and pressed his thighs as close as they'd go, straining so hard they were quivering with the effort. Sirius was suddenly grateful to all those long hours at the gym. Mooney deserved to have the tightest possible grip to fuck into, and Sirius's new muscle mass was up to the challenge. Sirius felt the smile on Remus's lips as he leaned in to press a kiss to the underside of his jaw.
That's right, you clever thing.
Mooney praised, sending a kaleidoscope of butterflies fluttering through Sirius's stomach. He lined his body up behind Sirius's and stroked long, careful lines between his legs. His lips found the hollow behind Sirius's ear before he whispered,
Will you be able to keep your balance if you're on your toes?
Fireworks shot behind Sirius's eyes as firm fingers dug into the space behind his balls. His toes pointed of their own accord, and his hand flew to thread itself through Remus's curls, his back arched in pleasure.
Mooney,
He cried, gasping at the surprising, familiar zing that ran up his spine from the pressure between his legs. He hadn't even known it was possible to hit a prostate from the outside.
Quiet, Padfoot.
Remus murmured, even as the cruel, wonderful prick rubbed maddening circles in Sirius's perineum.
We're in public, you know. Discretion is key.
Sirius pulled his lips between his teeth, forcing his ragged pants through his nose instead, and nodded. Mooney seemed to take that as a challenge and kept pressing and releasing that spot, over and over, until Sirius's knees shook and his slit leaked a steady stream of pre-cum. Finally, Remus seemed satisfied that he'd tortured Sirius enough, or maybe he couldn't ignore his own need any longer, the hot weight of him pressing persistently against Sirius's arse. He wrapped an arm around Sirius's torso, one possessive hand spread across his sternum, and swiped the lube on his palm over his cock. The head nudged against the apex of Sirius's thighs as Remus sucked a bruise beneath his ear.
Ready?
yes.
Sirius said, redoubling his efforts to squeeze his legs together. He'd be embarrassed about how high and breathy his voice sounded if he still had any blood in his brain. Fortunately for Sirius's shame, his circulatory system was otherwise occupied. Remus eased into him with a soft groan, like he was savoring the sensation. Sirius did the same. He felt every inch of Remus's length gliding along the sensitive skin behind his sack, the light pressure just enough to tease at the memory of Remus's fingers on his prostate, nerves alight as he imagined what it would feel like to have Mooney inside him, splitting him wide open. He watched, rapt, as Remus's flushed head peeked between his legs and disappeared again in a steady rhythm as Remus experimentally rolled his hips. It was bizarrely, obscenely sexy, knowing he could watch every stroke as Mooney fucked him.
Oh my God.
Sirius muttered, staring down in fascination. Remus chuckled and chastised Sirius gently.
Hush, baby, public.
In response, Sirius cupped his hand beneath his balls and waited, drawing a quiet moan from Remus when his next thrust was met with the friction of Sirius's palm. Mooney shook his head and sucked the kiss into Sirius's neck.
Menace,
he mumbled. Then Remus drew back and slammed forward, gripping the Adonis belt he'd so envied tightly enough to bruise, sending a jolt of pleasure through Sirius as his hips met Sirius's arse. Then again and again, Sirius's cock bobbing in time with his thrusts, the sensation ramping up, pulling soft whimpers from Sirius's throat until one stroke landed just right on his prostate. Sirius moaned, deep and guttural.
Oh my God.
Remus huffed in that fondly frustrated way Sirius knew so well. The arm around Sirius's torso tightened, and the hand crawled up his chest until it rested on his chin.
I should have known you'd be a loud lay.
Remus hissed in his ear.
Open, love. We'll have to keep that mouth occupied.
Sirius obeyed, letting 3 fingers slip into his mouth. He laved between them, tasting Remus's skin, then sealed his lips in a tight O and sucked. His eyes rolled back in his head, lost to sensation as Remus's hips started to twitch, and his fingers pressed down on his tongue.
Fuck, look at you.
Remus breathed, awe apparent in his voice.
God, you're gorgeous.
Sirius moaned again, muffled this time, and sucked harder.
You love that, don't you?
Remus murmured, low and soothing, a steady stream of quiet filth in Sirius's ear.
You'd love to suck my cock, wouldn't you, sweetheart? You're quite literally gagging for it. Want to take me so far back you choke on it. You'd look so pretty with me in your mouth. Do you want that, baby?
Sirius nodded. He would have turned and dropped to his knees right there if Remus hadn't been holding him so tight, but it was clear he didn't intend to let go. He pressed a kiss to Sirius's temple.
Me too, love. Next time. We'll get there. We have plenty of time.
Sirius's heart skittered. Next time. Remus was planning for next time, because he wanted to do this again. The smile in Remus's voice turned sharp.
But not right now. Right now you need to be quiet.
And with that, he thrust between Sirius's legs again, working his fingers and pelvis in tandem, a fast, steady motion that made Sirius's head spin. Then Sirius squeezed his thighs tighter just as Remus pushed through, and a low rumble vibrated through his chest.
Fuck Sirius,
he mumbled, picking up the pace as he mouthed at Sirius's shoulder. Sirius flexed and relaxed his legs in time, doing his best to make every press forward the tightest thing Remus had ever felt, watching through half-lidded eyes as he admired the stark contrast of Mooney's leaking purple cockhead between his own pale thighs. Because Sirius was watching so closely, enthralled with the sight of Remus pushing into him, he knew it was happening before Remus did. He felt the stuttering jerk of his hips as he approached his climax, knew the exact moment the wandering lips on his shoulder turned to teeth to muffle his cries, and watched as Remus's release coated Sirius's cock and balls, his thighs, the clean white tile of the gym shower. Sirius squeezed his legs tighter, as tight as they could go, and let Remus fuck himself through his orgasm. A perverse sort of happiness filled his chest when he felt the cum creeping up between his arse cheeks and running down his hamstrings.
Yours.
Some deep part of his brain hummed in satisfaction.
Yours, I'm all yours.
Remus slowed to a stop, hips pressed to Sirius's arse, cock still trapped firmly between his legs. He swiped a hand through the slick mess on Sirius's thighs and took him in hand, pressing soothing kisses to the bite on his shoulder as he brought Sirius off with 3 quick flicks of his wrist. Sirius didn't think he'd ever come so hard in his life. His whole body shuddered and shook as he gagged around the fingers still buried in his mouth, adding his own release to the stripes Remus had already painted across the wall. Sirius collapsed forward, chest heaving, as Remus's gentle touch stroked over his skin. Soothing hands roved over his chest, his hips, following the lines of his tattoos and muscles, exploring the landscape Sirius was elated to turn over to be freely, adoringly mapped. Sirius noted with a confused jolt of regret and satisfaction that there were tooth marks on Remus's left knuckles. Not deep enough to break the skin, thank goodness. Remus healed slowly and scarred easily, and Sirius would never forgive himself for any lasting damage. But the reciprocal marks on his shoulder and Remus's hands felt like a commitment, like physical evidence this happened so neither of them could panic and sweep it under the rug. Their bodies carried the proof. Sirius turned and pulled Remus close, nuzzling his neck and pressing kisses across his collarbone as Remus's palms wandered down his back to settle on the swell of his arse. Remus sighed, his warm puff of breath sending a few loose strands of Sirius's hair to tickle his neck.
We need to get going.
Sirius shook his head and buried his face in Remus's neck. He never wanted to leave the safe, sodden warmth of this shower. Remus huffed a laugh and kissed his temple.
We do, Padfoot. We need to go to work, and we're going to get banned from this gym, and possibly arrested, if we get caught.
I'll pay for our solicitor.
Sirius promised, though he allowed himself to be guided beneath the shower's spray.
And what about the banned from the gym part?
Remus asked, pretending to humor Sirius's offer that he'd never actually accept.
Who cares?
Sirius countered. Remus laughed.
Prongs might.
Sirius wrinkled his nose. It wasn't a great reason, but James had been very kind and very effective in helping Remus out, and he even let Sirius make a nuisance of himself for months on end. This was his favorite gym. They probably owed it to him to let him keep it.
Fine.
Despite Remus's insistence they needed to hurry, their shower took ages. They kissed languidly, tongues swiping and hands grasping, cocooned in rolling steam and each other's attention. Remus washed the lube and cum from Sirius's legs, cheeks adorably pink as he faced the consequences of his filthy, sexy actions. Sirius rinsed their art from the wall, all evidence of their tryst washed down the drain. Mooney turned off the water and dried himself, his curls so adorably fluffy and disheveled that Sirius couldn't help but kiss him again when he freed them from their terry cloth torture chamber. That somehow culminated in Sirius's towel in a pile on the floor as he crowded Remus against the wall, their bodies aligned from lips to toes. They finally managed to pry themselves apart and snuck out of the showers, separating their exits by just long enough it might not be obvious they were sharing a stall. They got ready for work in a quietly giddy parallel, stealing glances as they dressed and gathered their things, shoulders brushing as they walked toward the car park. Sirius's cheeks hurt from grinning by the time they got to his vehicle. He tossed his bag in the back seat, then Remus's, and turned to him with a smile. Mooney grinned back, soft and dopey, as he let Sirius pull him in for another kiss.
Do you want to ride to work?
Sirius asked, hands glued to Remus's hips. He'd never again get more than an arm's length away if Sirius had anything to say about it.
I always take the tube.
Remus said with an affectionate eye roll and a soft smile. Sirius shrugged.
Wouldn't have to, though. I'd be happy to drive you.
The tube is faster and we both know it. If you drive me, traffic will make both of us late.
Remus argued, then he leaned in to kiss Sirius.
Daft thing.
Sirius hummed, willing to accept any criticism if it kept Remus's lips attached to his. He didn't care that they were snogging each other senseless, in full view of anyone who happened to look out the gym's windows. Actually, that might be a good thing.
How did Benji take the rejection?
He managed to ask around a series of quick pecks.
Oh, he just wanted to tell me how bad you are at Pilates.
Remus said and went in for another kiss. It landed somewhere close to Sirius's nose as he squawked in indignation.
I am not.
Remus gave him a pitying look that managed to last 3 seconds before he dissolved into giggles.
You were fine, love. And you were also right. He asked me out.
And
Sirius prompted.
And I said no. Then I came to the locker room and shanked your brains out.
You did.
Sirius agreed smugly.
It was ages before you followed me, though. What took so long?
Benji is a certified yapper.
Remus complained.
It took him 5 minutes to get around to actually asking me out. I really did think he just wanted to talk to me about Pilates.
How?
Sirius asked, mystified.
He's looked at you like a 6'4" millionaire shortbread since the first time he laid eyes on you.
Sirius paused.
Not that I blame him, of course. Look at you.
Remus huffed and rolled his eyes.
You're ridiculous.
You're mine, though. Off limits to lithe Pilates instructors.
Sirius clarified, just in case there was any question.
I think between my refusal and your implied threat of bodily harm, he got the point.
Remus pretended to be exasperated, but his smile was so wide it made his eyes crinkle.
I didn't threaten him.
Sirius defended.
Sirius, you almost bit him.
Did not.
Sirius complained, though it quickly gave way to a smirk.
Did bite you, though. Just a little.
Remus's cheeks turned pink.
You did.
And you liked it?
Sirius stated. They went pinker.
Might have done, yeah.
Remus leaned in close to whisper in Sirius's ear.
You liked it too.
Sirius's eyes fluttered shut as he remembered the sting of Remus's teeth in his shoulder.
I really, really did.
Remus pressed a soft kiss to his lips.
We need to go.
I know.
Sirius sighed, brimming with the regret of gainful employment, and pulled him in to kiss him again.
Have a good day.
Remus smiled and kissed him back.
Have a good day.
See you at home.
Kiss.
See you at home.
Kiss, kiss.
I'll miss you.
Kiss.
It's 8 hours.
Kiss, kiss.
You're ridiculous.
A bit. It's true, though.
Sirius shrugged.
I always do. I just didn't realize that's what I was feeling before.
Remus smiled and shook his head, and Sirius knew that meant he'd miss him too, even if he was too stubbornly logical to admit it.
Have a good day, Padfoot. I'm leaving now so I don't get sacked.
He leaned in to give Sirius one last long, lingering kiss.
Bye, baby.
Bye.
Sirius mumbled as he watched him go, stomach flipping somersaults when he turned back for one last look before disappearing toward the tube. Chapter 7. Sirius stared dazedly at an email on his computer screen, clicking aimlessly around the page and typing strings of nonsense that he then deleted. He'd accomplished 1/10 of a fuck all since he got to work, and who could blame him? His mind was well occupied with Remus Lupin. When all was said and done, extended goodbyes bidden, and lingering kisses tasted, Sirius had only been 10 minutes late for work. Remus had also been fine. He sent a photo showing 1 minute to spare on his work computer, alongside the plastic skeleton from the Surgeon's Hall Museum that Sirius gave him as a spare for his own shoddy one. He'd distracted Remus by mixing up the gift shop bookshelf so Sirius could sneak away to make his purchase, and he remembered with perfect clarity how giddy and excited he'd felt to have found the perfect souvenir. Of course, he told himself at the time that he was proud to have pranked Mooney. Sirius really had been thick, hadn't he?
What's so bloody funny?
Marlene, his opposite station coworker, asked, startling Sirius out of gazing at his text thread with Mooney like a complete sop. Marlene was in her mid-40s and acted as Sirius's work bestie/mentor, by which Sirius meant she showed him all the standard project shortcuts, taught him how to time his breaks on Friday afternoons so he wouldn't get pulled into a last-minute task that would eat into his weekend, and shared her crisps with him when she bought some from the vending machine. She had bottle blonde hair, immaculate red lipstick, 3 ex-fiancés and a long-term girlfriend, and the vocabulary of a sailor. Sirius adored her.
You haven't smiled that much since you showed me the video of that deer tripping through the playset in time with the In the Air Tonight drum solo.
Sirius snorted.
We should have just gotten rid of the internet after that one. That's where we peaked as a society.
Amen, sister.
Marlene agreed.
Are you planning on doing any actual work today, or are you just pretending to look busy?
The second one, definitely,
Sirius said.
I can't do a thing until I hear back from Sybil, whose afternoon calendar is blocked for her usual Thursday leadership meditation exercise. I should get a response in 4 to 7 business weeks.
Cheers. Make yourself useful and fix us a cuppa then, will you?
Marlene barked just as Sirius's phone buzzed.
Hello, emergency contacts. I thought you'd like to know. My shoulder is out.
Oh, fuck. Sit tight, Moons, will be right there. Shit, fuck.
Sirius muttered as he quickly gathered his things and logged out of his computer.
Sorry, Miles, can't. Gotta go.
Sirius hesitated as he tried to fill in the blank. Friend, boyfriend, soulmate. They hadn't actually said much after Sirius told Mooney he wanted them to be together. It had all devolved into debauchery and desecrating James's most sacred house of worship. Maybe his second most sacred, now that he had Lily's cunt to pray to. Very quickly.
Remus has a joint out, and I'm his emergency contact. I need to get home to help him.
Marlene hummed, eyes flicking down to Sirius's neck and back.
Sure. Best of luck with your Remus. See you tomorrow.
Sirius gave a half-hearted wave over his shoulder and tapped out a message to his boss to say he'd be out for the rest of the day. Horace only checked his email when he was waiting on a golf invite from some parliamentary up-and-comer he'd mentored, or to make sure his expensive cognac delivery was on schedule, so he probably wouldn't even notice Sirius was missing until he'd gotten back and had a chance to make up for lost time. Besides, Horace adored Sirius. Not for anything he'd done. It was only for his last name and his connection to the Black family, no matter how tenuous that thread may be. Still, it allowed Sirius a tremendous amount of leeway to fuck off at work, and he wasn't about to look that particular gift horse in the mouth. He sped home as quickly as he could, grateful Mooney's shoulder had decided to go rogue well after the morning rush hour was over. Sitting in traffic whilst knowing his person was suffering would have been pure torture. Sirius raced up the stairs and banged into their flat.
Moons, where are you?
He towed off his shoes as he rushed toward the bathroom and grabbed the usual supplies from the medicine cabinet.
What do you need?
I'm in here.
Remus called from his bedroom. Good. He didn't sound too distressed. Probably wouldn't be a trip to A&E then. The door wasn't latched shut, so Sirius nudged it open with his shoulder and stopped dead in his tracks. Mooney was spread across his navy sheets with one hand propped behind his head in a clearly posed intent to entice. The duvet was slung so low across his hips, Sirius could see his entire bare torso and the sharp bones of his hips, lower still on Sirius's side, so the curve where his arse pressed into the mattress peeked out. Sunlight danced through the thin golden line of hair beneath his belly button that trailed down, 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 slowly widening until it disappeared beneath the blanket, a tantalizing hint at the soft thatch at the base of his cock. God, Sirius loved learning that Remus was such a little trollop. His eyes raked over Remus's soft body, both the bits he could see and the parts he was imagining, and snagged on the fabric below his waist. He raised a cocky eyebrow and smirked.
Is that a wrinkle in the sheets, or are you just happy to see me?
Remus laughed, cheeks coloring.
There's only one way to find out, I suppose.
Sirius didn't need telling twice. He tossed his supply of pain meds on the dresser and stripped out of his clothes so quickly it might as well have been magic, then bounded across the room. Remus bit his lip against his smile and lifted the duvet to let Sirius inside. Sirius caught a quick glimpse of his hard length resting in the crease of his thigh before he slid into the warm cocoon of blankets and body heat. He could feel himself beaming as he pulled Remus in close.
Hi.
Sirius murmured and gave him a soft kiss. lips parting, their heads dropped together onto their shared pillow.
Hello.
Remus whispered back. The world faded away around them, everything narrowing to the absolute vision in front of him. Nothing remained but the soft look on his Mooney's face, and the feeling of his skin pressed against Sirius's, the striking amber of his eyes and the warm hand pressed to his lower back. Sirius kissed him again and spoke quietly so as to not disturb the stillness around them.
Am I safe to assume your shoulder is fine?
I have a chronic illness that causes me immense pain and frequent joint damage. It only seems fair I should get to fake it once in a while as a trade-off.
Remus bit his lip and looked at Sirius through his lashes.
Do you mind? Is that okay?
Sirius barked a loud laugh. It popped the bubble of frozen time around them, but he found he didn't mind. The only way to get to their future was through the present, and this moment was no less sweet for being fleeting.
That you called me out of work so you could greet me like a wet dream and presumably shag me blind. Not in the slightest.
Good.
Remus hummed and pulled their hips together, startling a surprised gasp from Sirius's chest.
Let's get to it then.
He captured Sirius's lips and kissed him, slow and filthy, with languid rolls of his hips that promised they had all the time in the world. Sirius let himself be taken, opening his mouth to let his tongue inside, stroking the arch of his cheek before sliding his hand back to thread his fingers through Mooney's curls. Remus made a soft sound into his mouth, somewhere between a sigh and a groan that sent a shudder down Sirius's spine. They were doing this. They were wrapped up in each other in Mooney's bed, legs and tongues tangled together, Sirius's mind blissfully blank except for thoughts of yes and more. And finally, Sirius hadn't known this was what he'd wanted until just a few hours before, but now he held the entire universe in his arms. He just hoped he'd be allowed to keep it, that Mooney wanted it too. He must, right? Sirius couldn't be the only one having feelings here. He just couldn't. Sharp teeth caught his earlobe, pulling Sirius out of his head and back into his body.
I need you inside me.
Remus purred.
Shit, Moons.
Sirius hissed, his cock twitching at the thought of picking up where Remus's body had so rudely interrupted them earlier. He tugged Remus's lips against his and kissed him hard.
Yes, please.
Remus rolled off of where he was half lying on Sirius. When had that happened? And flopped on his back. Sirius followed behind, dazed and cock-drunk, pressing Remus into the bed with his arms bracketing his head. They were so close that Remus filled every one of Sirius's senses, taste, smell, sight, hearing, touch, all of it just Mooney, Mooney, Mooney. And the idea that soon they'd be closer still sent a swell of heady emotion washing over Sirius. He managed to wrench himself away to look down at Remus's flushed face.
Wait, hold on.
Sirius panted, internally cursing himself for pushing off something he wanted so badly.
Should we talk about this first?
A smile twitched at Remus's lips, his expression somewhere between fond and exasperated.
We could.
He agreed. He wobbled his head like he was giving Sirius's words some consideration before his face melted into a wicked grin.
Or we could wait until after.
He wrapped a leg around Sirius's waist and pulled him in close, so close their trapped cocks slid against each other, and Sirius was lost.
After.
He nodded, diving forward to kiss Remus and nip at his lip.
After is better. Definitely after.
Remus laughed, pure joy spilling from his lips into Sirius's and warming him all the way down to his toes. He flung his arms behind Sirius's neck and dragged him back in for another series of kisses that left them both needy and panting when Sirius finally managed to pull himself away. Even then, he couldn't bear to separate them further than a breath apart, their noses and foreheads still pressed together as he looked into hazy, amber eyes.
Lube,
he murmured, like it was some sort of romantic confession instead of a bid for mutual, erotic satisfaction.
Bottom drawer?
Remus mumbled back, already trying to press their lips together again. Sirius let him. Why wouldn't he? He was pretty sure he'd never get sick of kissing Mooney, before rolling off him to reach into the bedside table. His eyes nearly bugged out of his head when he saw its contents.
You really meant bottom drawer, didn't you?
He cackled with unrestrained glee. The lube, fancy silicone shit, as Sirius predicted, though he hadn't expected the classy glass bottle, was nestled in amongst an array of plugs, massagers, and a little box that dispensed warm, wet wipes when Sirius popped the top open. He turned to Remus with a face-splitting grin.
Mooney, are you a secret slag?
That usually involves pulling, so no.
Remus said primly, though his lips tugged up at the corners in a smile he couldn't quite contain.
I prefer to think of myself as an A-star tosser.
Sirius grabbed the bottle and straddled Remus with a breathless kiss.
I have no idea why this is so sexy, but it's really doing it for me.
Remus chuckled into his mouth.
You're a freak who gets off on strategy and a well-executed plan. Did you not know that?
Sirius hummed.
I think it's just you, actually. Everything you do is the perfect combination of sexy and cute. You can't help yourself.
You're an idiot.
Remus shook his head in a poor attempt to cover the pleased pink in his cheeks and fond smile.
Only for you,
Sirius said. It was pathetically, embarrassingly true, both in that Sirius had been so dense in recognizing his feelings and that he'd make an absolute fool of himself if it made Mooney smile. He realized, perhaps belatedly, that a sizable chunk of his mind was devoted to Remus, his likes and dislikes, whether he was eating enough, if his knee had been making a funny clicking noise and needed a new brace, a book he might want to read, a song that brought him back to a trip the pair of them had shared. Most things reminded Sirius of him in some way. All roads lead to Remus. Sirius kissed him then, slow and deep, savoring the warmth of Remus in his arms and the feel of his breath across his skin. He didn't want to rush this. He wanted Mooney to know he would always give him the time and attention he deserved. So he waited, letting them learn the taste of each other's kiss and drag of their tongues, threading curious fingers through soft strands of hair to stroke and tug, finding the places that made goosebumps erupt across each other's skin, only to trace those, too. They explored the lines of each other's bodies with wandering hands until Remus was squirming beneath him and hard against his hip. Sirius broke away to pant into his mouth.
Condom.
Remus shook his head.
I'm okay without, if you are. It's up to you.
There was no unspoken question there, only quiet trust. Trust that Sirius would choose to protect Remus if he was at all unsure. Trust that Remus would do the same for him. An overwhelming wave of affection washed over Sirius, so heavy he thought he might drown in it. Of course, sleeping with Mooney would feel like this. Of course, the steady, unwavering comfort and mutual understanding of their friendship would follow them to bed. What an idiot Sirius had been, not to realize how good this would be years ago.
I'm good without.
Sirius breathed, staring into wide brown eyes and trying to project the depth of his devotion without words.
Okay.
Okay.
Remus smiled.
Now fuck me, you great sob.
Bossy.
Sirius chuckled and gave him a peck on the lips, then slipped off to plaster himself to Remus's side. He rifled through the sheets until he came up with the heavy bottle of lube and ran his hand up one of Remus's spread thighs.
Tell me if there's anything wrong, if something hurts or I need to do something differently, if you just don't want to do this anymore, or you want to top instead. Anything. Say the word, and I'll stop.
Remus huffed and rolled his eyes, though his expression was impossibly fond.
That won't happen, but yes, fine. I promise to tell you if I move anywhere below enthusiastic consent.
Thank you.
Sirius said and coated his fingers in a healthy layer of lube. He leaned down to kiss Remus, slow and filthy, as he circled his entrance and pressed one cautious finger inside. Mooney sighed and relaxed around him, drawing him in without a hint of resistance.
Shit, Moons, you're so sexy.
Sirius muttered into his mouth. He worked his wrist in slow, smooth thrusts that left him with a sense of awe at how willing and pliant Remus's body was to accept him.
You take me so well.
A red flush worked its way up Remus's chest, though it wasn't clear whether that was from the praise or the pressure Sirius was applying to his prostate. It didn't matter. Sirius leaned down to press a kiss to the hollow of his throat where it bloomed brightest.
Are you ready for another?
Please.
Remus whimpered, squirming and grinding back against Sirius's hand.
Please, Padfoot, I need more.
All right, sweetheart. I'll take care of you.
Sirius did as he was asked, never able to deny his Mooney anything he wanted. He worked him open slowly, one finger at a time, treating his body with the reverence he deserved. His eyes never strayed from Remus's face. Every expression and flutter of lashes, every whine and moan catalogued as Sirius built himself a library of ways to bring him pleasure. Finally, when Mooney was writhing and whimpering, rubbing his sweaty curls across the pillows as he arched and begged Sirius to
fuck me, please.
Sirius crawled between his thighs. A gasp tore through his chest as he breached the slick, so tight, heat in one slow, smooth thrust. Remus's body welcomed him, drawing him in until his hips were flush against Mooney's bum. Sirius rested his elbows on either side of Remus's head, pressed them chest to chest, and brought their lips together as he shifted his weight inside him. Their bodies were woven together, closer than felt humanly possible, even their legs intertwined as Mooney hooked his feet under Sirius's shins. He kept things slow and gentle, nothing more than a deep, steady grind of his hips as he propped himself up to see Mooney's face.
Beautiful.
Sirius thought as his thumb brushed over the constellations of freckles sprinkled across Mooney's cheek.
Beautiful.
He thought when his face scrunched up in the yes but no, but so close don't stop frustration of learning a new partner's body.
Beautiful.
He thought of the heavy, punched-out breaths and soft keening that spilled from Remus's lips.
Beautiful.
He thought when the hitch in Remus's chest told Sirius he'd found the spot deep inside him that would make his Mooney feel good.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Sirius had no idea how long they were wrapped in each other. It could have been minutes. It could have been days. It may have transcended linear time altogether, the way deeply religious experiences often did. He couldn't worry about such mundanity when he was worshipping at the altar of Remus Lupin, too transfixed by his ethereal face to tear his eyes away. But eventually, Mooney's back arched and his hands scrabbled at Sirius's skin, his nails digging long red paths alongside his spine as he searched for more, hot breath panting into Sirius's neck. Sirius took him in hand with a soft press of their lips.
I've got you, love. I've got you.
Remus's heavy-lidded eyes, dazed but unwavering, caught Sirius's and stripped him down to his barest parts. There was nothing left of Sirius but what Remus could see, what Remus could feel. Sirius's very atoms would tear themselves apart and realign in any way Mooney wanted, so long as he kept looking at Sirius like that. And he did, for as long as he could, until his eyes rolled back in his head and his neck arched, until his body shuddered and he spilled over in Sirius's hand with a small sound that went straight to Sirius's bones and built a home in his marrow. It was stunning, a divine experience to behold, a moment of pure, perfect bliss painted across his features and seared, white-hot into Sirius's memory forever. Remus's orgasm brought Sirius to the very edge, the rapid, rhythmic pulse of his walls as he fucked him through. It felt like it lasted forever, squeezing until Sirius couldn't hold back any longer. He tucked his head in the crook of Remus's neck and buried himself deep as he came with a ragged cry. They came down together, pounding hearts settling into a steady rhythm and heaving breaths evening out, as Sirius mouthed at Remus's prominent collarbone.
That was,
he murmured, not sure the words he needed to describe how he felt even existed in the English language. Remus covered his face with his hands, letting out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a delirious laugh.
That was not what I imagined.
Sirius felt like he should be offended, but his mind seized on a different part of that sentence instead. He kissed the line of Remus's jaw and nuzzled behind his ear as he felt himself soften and slip out.
You imagined what it would be like to sleep with me.
Remus peeked between his fingers to level him with a scathing look.
I have spent entire days of my life thinking about what it would be like to sleep with you.
Oh,
Sirius said, flopping next to him to stare at the ceiling whilst he absorbed that information. Entire days of his life. How long had Mooney known about them? Had Sirius lived up to the fantasy?
and it was disappointing.
He worried his lip between his teeth. He certainly hoped it wasn't disappointing for Remus. It was the most fulfilling sex Sirius had ever had. Remus laughed again, the tone tinged in disbelief, before he pulled Sirius's hand up to kiss the inside of his wrist.
Absolutely not disappointing, just different.
Different how?
Sirius asked, still a little disgruntled that Remus had thought this through enough to have expectations to subvert, while Sirius was experiencing it all in real time. He opened the bottom drawer and plucked a couple warm wipes out of the dispenser.
I expected you to be all brash and performative. You're much softer than I would have thought.
I'm not soft.
Sirius scoffed.
Right.
Remus agreed with an arched brow as he eyed where Sirius was cleaning him up, wiping gently between his legs and cheeks and kissing the prominent bone of his hip.
Proper feral you are. You called me beautiful the entire time, Pads.
Oh.
Sirius felt himself blush.
I didn't realize that was out loud.
Remus bit back a bashful smile.
It was.
Well, it's different with you. You're the exception.
Obviously, Remus was the exception to all Sirius's rules, the only person he bothered to look out for, to worry about, to take care of in any meaningful way. Everyone else was on their own, but Sirius always accounted for Remus's needs. Why would this be any different?
Oh,
Remus said. It was his turn to blush.
I guess I shouldn't be shocked. I've always known the guard dog act was put on. You're really just an eager puppy at heart.
I'm not.
Sirius complained, tugging Remus into his chest for a cuddle.
You absolutely are, once someone has pushed past the snapping and growling stage.
Remus pressed a kiss to his chest before settling in against his side.
Ask Lily. She's the most recent one to bother learning. You aren't as much of an asshole as you seem.
Thanks.
Sirius snorted. His sharp exhale made Mooney's damp curls flutter.
That's very generous of you.
I love that about you.
Remus shrugged, like he hadn't just said something that sent Sirius's heart racing in his chest and butterflies aflutter in his stomach.
Makes a bloke feel special to have earned the affection of Sirius Black. Not many people are worthy.
Sirius glared at him, incredulous.
You think you had to earn it? I've been obsessed with you since the moment we met.
Yeah, right.
Remus laughed.
It's true.
Sirius squawked.
Showing up first year with those big brown eyes and hardly saying a word. You were so mysterious. I wanted to know everything about you.
I could barely look at you. You and James. You were so bright. I felt like I'd get burned if I got too close, but I couldn't help but be drawn in anyway.
Remus pressed a kiss to Sirius's ribs.
It was worth it, I'd say.
Sirius hummed, not willing to grace such an understatement with a genuine response. He couldn't imagine his life without Mooney.
Hey, Moons.
Yes, love.
Remus probed, his voice soft but alert.
What are we doing here? Where do you want us to go?
There was only one route Sirius was interested in. One-way ticket to Relationshipshire, please. The high-speed line.
Well, I thought we'd grab a shower, maybe, clean up a bit, and then order in something to eat, and, hey, cut that out.
Remus squirmed away when Sirius pinched his side.
You know what I mean?
Sirius scolded.
I don't, actually. You better ask me properly, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Remus suggested. He propped himself on his elbow and looked at Sirius with the biggest grin he'd ever seen when he huffed. He was so proud of himself, the little shit. Sirius rolled his eyes and gestured between them.
This, Mooney. Us. Our relationship, whatever that means. Do you want to
Date me, love me, marry me maybe, get a dog and buy a house and secretly consider the distance to various primary schools?
I don't know. Be my boyfriend.
Yeah, I think that'd be okay.
Remus shrugged and settled back into his place on Sirius's chest, where he could feel his smile pressing into his skin.
I'm being vulnerable here, you dickhead.
Sirius grumbled and bent to kiss his hair.
I know, it's very cute.
Remus said, scooting up the bed so he could beam down at Sirius.
Yes, I very much want to do the whole proper relationship thing. Be your boyfriend, introduce you to my parents, shag your brains out, and then fall asleep on the couch watching telly.
Hope and Lyle already love me.
Sirius pointed out, a blush filling his cheeks as he tried to contain how giddy he was. He was just so unbelievably happy. He didn't know he could feel like this. Remus snorted.
I know. If I'm not careful, you'll oust me as favorite son.
Impossible.
Sirius rejected the idea that Mooney wouldn't be anybody's favorite person, provided they were lucky enough to actually know him. Really, it was part of the reason Sirius was so territorial about him. Mooney was a certified catch, and if he made other friends, he'd have less time for Sirius. That simply would not do. Though the whole being in love with him thing might have factored in a bit, now that he thought about it.
Hey, Moons.
He asked again.
Yes, love.
Remus answered, voice laced with affection.
How long have you known? That you wanted me, I mean.
Sirius was half afraid to hear the answer. Remus shook his head.
No, thank you. Pass.
Come on.
Sirius cajoled.
You've already told me you've thought about shagging me before. How long ago? Since when?
Remus sighed and buried his face in Sirius's chest, so his voice came out all muffled and resigned.
Since I was about 15. On and off, in varying intensity. I kept almost getting over it, or at least stifling it, until it felt like I could maybe find someone else. And then you'd do something all generous and sweet, and I'd have to start over again.
8 years.
Sirius shouted.
We could have been doing this for 8 years.
Remus sat up and pinned him with an incredulous glare.
No, we couldn't. I wanted you. You didn't want me.
Sirius opened and closed his mouth a few times, trying to form an argument and coming up short. He tried anyway.
Nuh-uh.
Remus laughed.
Sure, love. In that case, when did you know?
Sirius felt a bit silly. He pulled out his phone to look at the time.
4 hours, probably.
See? Unrequited?
Remus crowed victorious.
But that doesn't mean I didn't feel it.
Sirius argued.
I didn't recognize it this morning until I thought a whole room full of people was going to watch you come, and I was furious that anybody but me would get to see it. But the feelings have definitely been there all along.
Oh my God.
Remus gaped at him.
What?
Oh my God.
He repeated.
The corgasm. Is all of this because of the corgasm?
No.
Sirius denied, his traitorous cheeks heating to call him on his lie.
It is.
Remus cried.
Oh my God, I can't believe this.
Peals of pretty laughter spilled out of him as he collapsed on Sirius's chest.
The most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. And you looked at it and thought, wow, I really need a piece of that. You're ridiculous.
To be fair to me, I spent months faffing about, trying to figure out how to have one myself, before realizing I just wanted to watch you come.
Sirius admitted, it should have been embarrassing, and with anyone else it would be. But with Remus, he knew the only response would be an exasperated, immeasurable fondness. He wasn't disappointed. Remus rolled on top of him, knees straddling his hips as he bent down to kiss Sirius's lips.
You're an idiot.
Only for you.
They spent the next hour in each other's arms, talking and laughing and feeling so much like them that Sirius wondered if they'd maybe been dating for years and hadn't realized it. Then they showered, and Sirius finally gave Remus's curls the attention they deserved, whilst Remus gave a demonstration with the covert lube. They ordered pizza and ate side by side like they always did, but this time Sirius recognized the casual comfort in pressing his thigh against Remus's for what it was. They snogged through 20 minutes of a film before Sirius found himself kneeling on the floor between Remus's spread knees, Mooney's hand buried in his hair, swallowing around his cock as he tried not to hump the side of the sofa like a naughty puppy. After Remus had come down the back of his throat, he tackled Sirius and returned the favor. The pair of them sprawled across the rug with their joggers pulled just below their arses, too intent on getting each other off to worry about getting naked. They were watching some panel show. Well, Remus was watching the show. Sirius was lying on top of him with his nose buried in Mooney's neck, when the flat's door crashed open and slammed shut. James's typically noisy homecoming followed with a heavy pair of trainers thumping against the floor and his keys jingling their way into the dish before he wandered into the flat. His footfalls stopped the second he caught sight of them. Sirius and Remus stayed put. They discussed it earlier and decided not to make any sort of big announcement about their relationship. It was so close to their normal already, they just wanted it to fit seamlessly into their existing lives. Several harsh taps sounded through the quiet room, and then James spoke.
It worked, Lils. The idiots figured it out.
There was a short pause where Sirius could just make out the quiet sounds of a woman's voice on the other end of the line then.
No. I'm sure. I can tell, because Padfoot is acting like a human blanket, and Mooney is so pleased with himself. I've spontaneously developed synesthesia to be able to hear his smug face.
Very funny.
Remus deadpanned without even a pause in stroking Sirius's hair. He did sound rather smug, though. Sirius felt compelled to kiss his neck. James ignored him completely.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture. They're disgusting.
Pride rang through his tone.
Piss off, Prongs.
Remus said without any heat. James laughed as his voice disappeared toward his bedroom.
Love you too, Mooney. Don't shag on my couch, you degenerates.
Too late.
Sirius called back. He smiled when Remus's chuckle dusted across his crown and was followed by a kiss. Sirius had never been so content. It was a perfect moment, with Mooney's hand in his hair and his scent filling his nose, certain in his very core that this didn't mark the end of a friendship, but rather the start of something more. Friends and not friends, too. This was the beginning of something great, but it wasn't the end of anything at all. He was definitely going to ask Prongs to send him that photo later. Epilogue 6 months later.
Morning, Bones. What show are you seeing this weekend?
Sirius leaned against the desk to chat with the trainer. Eddie really liked live music. Sirius had learned, and he'd tipped Sirius off to some great bands in the last couple months. Eddie shrugged.
Probably head to the Windmill tomorrow night. They've got some weird shit on the lineup. It's fun to get your eardrums blown out by 4 people who can barely play their instruments once in a while.
Can't relate, but it seems like you enjoy it. So good on you.
James smiled. He was the only person Sirius knew who could cheerfully tell people to their face that they had awful taste and get away with it.
That's because you have sensitive ears and no oral curiosity.
Remus teased.
Somebody has to go to the up-and-comers shows, otherwise they'd never come up.
Eddie explained with a shrug.
I can sit through a few shit bands to be able to say that I saw the next Queen at a 50-person venue.
Have fun digging for gold then. Let me know if you find something good, yeah.
Sirius asked. That probably wasn't in the cards for this weekend if even Bones thought the lineup leaned a bit experimental, but it seemed like the polite thing to say.
I will. See you later.
He saw them off with a little wave.
Hey, dickhead. Whoops, sorry, love.
Kara apologized to the poor bloke at the door who thought she was talking to him. She gave Sirius a sheepish grimace, which he met with a shit-eating grin and 20 quid.
What time will you be out?
Probably around 7:30, give or take a few minutes.
Sirius shrugged.
Have the usual ready.
1 blueberry acai and 1 peanut butter and banana, quite literally with your names on them.
She assured him, putting the cash in the till.
Tar, love. Keep the change.
Sirius patted the counter and turned to head to the locker room with Remus and James. It had taken a couple months and a pile of generous tips to get Kara back on side, but eventually her frozen heart had melted. She'd even told Sirius he and Remus were cute together and put some extra garnish on their smoothies shortly after she found out they were dating, so that fence seemed well mended. After they stored their things, Sirius walked Mooney to his weekly Pilates class.
You don't have to do this every time, you daft thing.
Remus scolded, though his pink cheeks told Sirius he rather liked it.
I know.
Sirius smiled.
I just want to.
He stopped abruptly just outside the door and turned Remus to face him, pressing his hand flat against Remus's lower back to pull him in for a lingering kiss. When they finally separated, panting more than was entirely appropriate for a public space, Remus gave him a look that was aiming for reproachful, but instead landed somewhere between indulgent and amused.
It might be faster to just piss on my leg, you know.
Mooney suggested.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Sirius denied. He caught Benji's eye over Remus's shoulder and arched a scornful brow before turning his attention back to his boyfriend.
Besides, that sounds like a good way to get arrested. It's generally frowned upon to redecorate communal spaces with your bodily fluids, you know.
Remus huffed.
Yes, you have a history of being very concerned about that.
He gave Sirius a quick peck on the lips.
I love you.
Love you too. See you in an hour, baby.
The last part was a bit louder, just enough to make sure it echoed through the studio before sending Remus on his way. Remus rolled his eyes and shook his head around a grin.
You good, mate?
James nudged Sirius's side as he watched him walk away. Sirius nodded and let himself be led to the weight machines. They spotted each other for a few sets of squats, then swapped equipment through some leg press and dumbbell lunge supersets. Sirius kept half an eye on the clock the whole time, not wanting to leave Mooney hanging after his class let out because James got a little too enthusiastic on his routine for the day. He knew Remus liked the Pilates classes, so of course Sirius would never complain about him going, but he did hate Thursday mornings. It wasn't a possessiveness or jealousy thing. He just liked fussing over his Mooney, and he missed him when he was otherwise occupied.
All right, we're almost done. You can stop staring at the door like a dog waiting for his owner to come home.
James chastised.
Bench press for 3 sets, then pull-ups to failure, a couple planks, and Mooney will be back to take you for your morning walk. Did he remember to grab your lead, or will you be breaking some leash laws today?
Fuck off.
Sirius shoved at his shoulder as James snickered.
It's not like you're any better. Lily has you just as whipped.
James sighed, a dreamy look coming over his face.
Yeah, she does. It's pretty great.
Ooh.
Sirius wrinkled his nose.
Piss off. I've been living with you lot for the last 6 months, and I promise that's more graphic than anything you've seen. Actually,
James chewed on his lip, looking like he was weighing whether to say something.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
About what? Our graphic displays in the living room. Because I promise, Prongs, cuddling and some light snogging is the least you're going to get from us in our own home. Homophobic twat.
Sirius grumbled, knowing full well James was almost as happy as Sirius was when they started dating. It turned out he'd been well aware of Mooney's feelings for ages and suspected Sirius's for almost as long. The sexual tension in their home finally shattering was probably a relief for James, more than it was for anyone else. James pushed the bar away from his chest with a grunt.
No, you idiot. The living arrangements.
Sirius sat on the metaphorical edge of his seat as James finished his set and racked the bar.
Lily and I want to move in together.
Huh, well,
That's not a bad idea.
Sirius said as he took his position on the bench.
Wait, really?
James gaped down at him.
You don't mind?
I mean, we'll have to make sure Mooney's okay with it, obviously. And we should check with the rental agency, see if there are any lease provisions against having 4 people in a 3-bedroom flat. If they have a problem with it, I could always buy a place and have you 3 pay rent, I suppose. Not that I care, you know, but Mooney is Mooney, and he would never let me just pay the bloody bills, so we'd have to.
No, Padfoot, no, that's not.
I don't mind, Prongs. I do have my trust fund. There's plenty of money. It's a little earlier than I was planning, but…
No, you beautiful idiot. That wasn't the part I was disagreeing with.
James cut him off with a scoff and an affectionate insult.
Lily's not moving in. I'm moving out.
That was not what Sirius had planned. They were supposed to be flatmates for a few years at least, spend most of their 20s making bad decisions together and reminiscing about them the next morning over a fry-up.
Oh, you want to leave?
Sirius.
James begged for understanding as they switched places again.
I don't want to leave. I want to move in with my girlfriend.
It's the same thing.
Sirius scoffed.
You're not planning to move her in. You want to live together. Ergo, you will be leaving our flat to move into hers.
We're looking for a different place entirely, actually. Something you could also do, for the record.
James sounded a little irritated now, like it was somehow Sirius's fault that he brought this up in the middle of their workout.
So this is a sure thing then. The decision has been made.
James gave him an apologetic grimace.
A bit, yeah. Unless we can't find somewhere we agree on. Or maybe if a meteor hits the Earth and takes us all out like the dinosaurs or something, but yeah, it is.
Oh, well, thanks for the warning, I guess. Congratulations.
James sighed.
Thanks, Padfoot. Take all the time you need to think about it. I'll be here when you're done.
He guided the bar back into the rack as Sirius finished his last set.
Pull-ups. Go until you can't anymore. Person to last the longest wins.
Fine, prick. Kick a bloke when he's down.
Sirius grumbled. James always won stuff like this. Not today, though. He didn't get to tell Sirius he was moving out and then immediately beat him at something. Sirius hopped up and grabbed the bar alongside James.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, go.
Sirius paced himself, matching James rep for rep, holding his body straight and tight as he hauled his chin over the bar again and again. Maybe, just possibly, Prongs could be a little bit right. Maybe it wouldn't be the end of the world for him and Remus to find a different place. A 1-bedroom, a little cheaper to split between the two of them. Mooney would like that. And they could get a place with a garage where Sirius could store his car and maybe rent another parking bay so he could finally get a motorbike like he'd been thinking about for years. Somewhere closer to work, or at least a better line on the tube. He'd love for Remus to spend less time rattling his poor bones on the train. That might not be so bad. And if James and Lily were looking, they could find a place near them too, right? In the same building even, if the location fit. It wouldn't have to change that much. They could figure it out, right? Sirius wasn't going to let him know that yet, though. He wanted to sulk a bit more, prove to Prongs just how mad he was. He would win this. Sirius had never been so damn determined. The heat of it raced through his veins, his resolve a burning coal in his gut as he pulled himself tight for a strong finish. It flared, searing hotter and hotter, until… Remus pushed through the studio door after his Pilates class and looked around in confusion. Sirius was usually waiting for him out here. He took every opportunity to gloat to Benji that Remus was his. Remus was baffled to be treated as such a prize, but did rather enjoy the experience all the same.
Pats.
He asked, not really expecting an answer. It's not like Sirius was going to jump out from behind a bin to scare him or something.
Prongs.
Still nothing. He reached in his pocket to check his phone and found a message from James.
Sorry, your boyfriend couldn't walk you to your locker after class today. There was a bit of an incident. We're in the locker room.
I'll be right there.
That didn't bode well. Remus hoped he hadn't been hurt. Of course he couldn't leave those two alone. They'd compete themselves into an early grave. How silly of him not to think of that. He burst through the locker room door in a mild panic.
Pads Prongs.
He called, garnering a few looks from strangers that normally would have made him wince. But he was too concerned about his boyfriend's well-being to be much fussed about it at the moment.
Where are you?
We're right here, Mooney.
Sirius called back. Remus followed his voice to the bench in front of the lockers they'd claimed earlier. Sirius sat, shoulders hunched, staring at a bin liner holding a crumpled heap of fabric that sat between his shoes. James was next to him, laughing so hard it was silent. The only sound was an occasional gasp for air as tears streamed down his cheeks. Sirius shoved James's shoulder.
Fuck off, you obnoxious git. This is your fault.
What's his fault?
Remus asked, looking between the pair to try and glean whatever had gone on in his absence. God, it was just like secondary school all over again. Remus felt like he was going to have to talk his way out of detention.
What happened?
Sirius dropped his head into his hands with a muffled groan of anguish. Remus turned to James with a probing look.
Prongs.
James wheezed, struggling to get the words out around his laughter.
We were doing, who could last? And he.
Spit it out, Prongs.
James wouldn't be crying actual tears of mirth if Sirius was injured, but something bad must have happened for Padfoot to look so miserable.
He had a corgasm.
James finally managed before falling into further peals of laughter. Curiosity shot through Remus's brain, down his spine, and settled somewhere right around his cock.
He did.
He turned to Sirius.
You did.
Sirius peered at him between his fingers, red-faced, and nodded.
What did it feel like?
Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora, Kaliana, and Flowerhawk.